Super Naruto Rapid Systems Upgrading. Chapter 1. Konoha 12 years, it was a legendary age recorded on the file. Tsuruda. Outside the nursery, the middle-aged man with his face full of stubborn stubble dangling his cigarette, looked a little tired. The Hanyu couple has died. Hearing this, the young man called Tsuruda shook his body involuntarily, looking a little incredulous, and asked with a trembling voice, "All dead?" After getting the affirmative answer from the middle-aged man, Tsuruda already had some tears in the corners of his eyes, and said mournfully, "Unexpectedly, a couple like Hanyu would die too." The middle-aged man breathed out a long breath of smoke and patted Tsuruda's shoulder to comfort him. "Tsuruda, you have done these righteous deeds. When the war is over, the above will not forget you." Hearing this, Tsuruda seemed to be humiliated and flushed with shame. "Where are you? The couple entrusted the children to me, and they trusted me. Even if they die, I must take the children. It is my responsibility to raise and grow up." After another greeting, the two slowly walked out. The two talking slowly walked out the door. They would not have thought that in the crib of the nursery room, there was a pair of eyes staring at their business card on the crib. Hanyu. Did I even cross into the Naruto world? Lee Jexuan squinted his eyes and looked at the Naruto calendar not far away. Konoha 12 years. This is not very good. As a Naruto fan, he knows most of the events that happen in the world of Naruto. 3 Ninja Wars. 9 Tails attack Konoha. The Uchiha family is dead. Baiju's plot. But what's bad is that most of these big events happened decades later. And Konoha's 12 years was a cruel an age, with only a few records of it, because this was just a simple war, fighting. Without power, I'm afraid I will die soon. Lee Jexuan closed his eyes, and a strange line of fonts slowly appeared before him. "Please receive your newbie gift pack." Lee Jexuan looked at the news that kept flashing before his eyes. At the same time, there is also an ordinary-looking wooden treasure chest that is emitting a faint fluorescence. Character: Lee Jexuan. Items: none. Chakra: none. Ninjutsu: none. System: Lee Jexuan sighed. As soon as he crossed over, he discovered this system. Ninja Training System. However, Lee Jexuan did not rashly open the treasure box presented by the system. If this box comes out of at all, with his baby's body, it is undoubtedly causing trouble for himself. Inside the tall floor-to-ceiling mirror, on the warm crib, a lovely baby is squinting and staring at the mirror closely. Unexpectedly, I turned into a baby. Lee Jexuan pinched his chin, not too annoyed. After all, if you count it seriously, it can be said to be rejuvenated. However, it is not the time to consider this matter yet. Lee Jexuan looked at the name Yu Hanyu on his bed, frowning involuntarily. If I heard it right, the parents of my own body have already died in the war. This nursery room should be a store that specializes in fostering babies for Konoha Ninja, and Tsuruda should be the owner of this baby care store. At this moment, the door of the nursery room was suddenly opened again. The owner of the nursery room, Tsuruda, is back. Lee Jexuan lay back quickly, but he saw between his eyelashes that the expression on Hachan's face was very ugly. A thin face is full of vulture sneers. "Hee hee, you little guy, I knew your parents were so short-lived, how could I not let you waste my food for so many days?" While talking, He Tianjing walked over to Lee Jexuan's bed and reached out to grab Lee Jexuan. He Tian's cold hands that looked like spider limbs pinched Lee Jexuan's neck, as if carrying a bag of garbage, and walked towards the back door of the nursery with Lee Jexuan. "Hey, good boy, you sleep really heavy." Hachan grinned and opened the trash can behind the store door, and threw Lee Jexuan directly in. 1 minute later, until it was confirmed that Tsuruda had left. Lee Jexuan stood up slowly from the trash can with some helplessness, and sighed uncontrollably when he looked at the solid iron cover on the trash can. Sure enough, this is the real ninja. But at this moment, a line of words popped out of Lee Jexuan's head. Novice task, phased task, escape the trash can. Task content. Because the black-hearted boss Tsuruda threw the young you in the trash. The night here is very cold. If you don't want to freeze to death, you'd better escape from the trash can within 3 hours. Task reward. Kumu throw elementary. Mission time limit. 3 hours. Escape from the trash can in 3 hours. It's simple to say, but Lee Jexuan carefully observed it. This trash can is a big guy 2 meters long and 1 meter high. The walls are smooth, without any focus, with his height of less than half a meter, it is simply a prison. Tsuruda. Lee Jexuan lowered his body and tried to find useful things in the trash can. It really gave me a big problem. Lee Jexuan fumbled for a long time, only to find a huge fish bone in the trash can. There is no need to try. This fish bone plus his own height is less than 1 meter. It seems that I can't escape with my own strength. This is why Tsuruda left him here with peace of mind. Lee Jexuan dropped the fish bones casually, sat down thinking about it, and saved his energy appropriately, which would allow him to hold on for longer. In this case, Lee Jexuan reached out and opened the wooden treasure chest in the system. I only hope that I can produce a prop that can escape here. Unfortunately, the progress of things often backfires. The wooden treasure chest opened slowly, and a faint fluorescence flashed. The most inferior treasure. Automatically recovered time and space kunai. Character. Lee Jexuan. Item. The time-space kunai that is automatically recycled, sharp than the general kunai, with the magical power of automatic recycling. Chakra. None. Ninjutsu. None. Lee Jexuan grabbed the black light in his hand, and sighed helplessly. Although it is a good thing, it does not help the current situation. Although this kuwu is sharp, Lee Jexuan's current strength is really too small. It's still too difficult to cut this thick iron plate with this kunai. More importantly, over time, Lee Jexuan's limbs were already cold and couldn't lift a bit of strength. Before he knew it, 2 hours had passed. That means that in the remaining hour, if I fail to escape, I will freeze to death. By now, Lee Jexuan couldn't care whether he would attract Hachan's attention anymore, and slammed his fist against the iron plate. Help, help. In this case, he can only hope that someone can hear him and rescue him. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of the crash in the trash can in the quiet alley seemed a little dull. Lee Jexuan raised his head and raised his arms, and then hit the hard iron plate one after another. Most of the last hour had passed, but Lee Jexuan felt that he might have been less than 3 hours. Although I have tried my best to save energy, calling for help is too much effort. Come on. Lee Jexuan felt that the heat in his chest was slowly passing away, and the life of a 1-year-old baby was so fragile, like a poor stray cat. Before long, he will be frozen into a popsicle, and then pulled away by the garbage collection cleaners and sent into a raging fire. Come on, help me. In a dark alley, a strong man carrying a basket full of herbs, rushing home with a firm face. Xiaodai is at home alone, I hope nothing happens. But at this moment, there was a bang. A strange noise suddenly came from the trash can in the corner. The man was stunned for a moment, and took 2 steps unconsciously, but soon. He still frowned and walked back slowly. Finally, someone came. In his confusion, Lee Jexuan seemed to hear a steady footstep coming towards him, with a pair of warm hands, gently hugging him. This kid is very similar to that kid in my family. The palm of the man's hand is warm, and the sound is like a fire in the winter, which makes people feel at ease. The task of escaping the trash can is completed, please receive the task reward. The system's voice still didn't fluctuate, as if he didn't care about Lee Jexuan's life or death. However, he finally survived. Lee Jexuan curled his lips with a smile, and closed his eyes comfortably. Seeing Lee Jexuan's smile, the man holding Lee Jexuan couldn't help but laughed, and put Lee Jexuan into his arms. Don't worry, I swear by Maitreya in the name of youth that I will definitely let you survive. As he said, the watermelon-headed man named Medway left with a big laugh, Konoha's forehead shimmering on his forehead. As long as there are places where leaves fly, the will of fire will not stop burning. A huge spider hung on the mottled ceiling full of stains, jumping horizontally to weave a web, with a very arrogant posture. Am I rescued? Lee Jexuan slowly opened his eyes, turned his head hard, and looked at the surrounding environment. Under the shabby ceiling, the empty Japanese-style room has no furniture except a wooden bed. This is really a poor home. After seeing these furnishings, Lee Jexuan found that there was a baby about his age lying beside him. The dumb watermelon head, tiger head and tiger brain, ugly and cute. In addition to this baby, there is a strong, mature man in this room. The mature man is dressed as a farmer, but his funny watermelon head makes him more alive. The man is holding a basket of herbs in his arms and carefully selecting. At first glance, this man with watermelon head gave Lee Jexuan a familiar feeling. However, There is a strangeness in this familiarity. All in all, Li Jexuan seemed to know him, but he was sure that he had never seen him. What a weird feeling. Li Jexuan shook his head and said nothing. When he didn't figure out the situation, he didn't want to show any unusual behavior beyond that of a baby. Li Jexuan gently closed his eyes again. Novice mission. Escape the trash can completed. Kunai throw elementary available. Receive. After confirming the receipt, Li Jexuan's head suddenly had a row of skill bars. Kunai throw elementary. At the same time, a sudden warm current gushed from Li Jexuan's hands, and the warm current slowly flowed from the tips of his 10 fingers to his whole body. Li Jexuan could feel that this warm current seemed to be strengthening his physique, but this warm current gradually became thinner as it flowed. When this warm current reached his feet, it had become insignificant. Obviously, his hands were the main enhancement of this warm current. When the warm current disappeared completely, Li Jexuan slowly opened his eyes, and involuntarily reached out and grabbed the wooden bedpost on the side. Squeak! The sawdust burst under Li Jexuan's grasp, making a sore sound. At the same time, an unspeakable feeling suddenly exploded in Li Jexuan's mind. It seems that there are countless experience and skills of throwing kunai desperately into Li Jexuan's brain. After a long while, Li Jexuan opened his eyes fiercely, and a sharp light flashed. Mastered. The skill of throwing kunai. Li Jexuan recalled the mysterious feeling carefully, and his wrist could not help but gently moved with his thoughts. He can feel that the combination of strength and skill, within 100 meters, his sufferings are all shots. But at this moment, perhaps Li Jexuan's unconscious movements were too big. Medway noticed something strange and came over and hugged Li Jexuan. You're awake. Medway picked up little Li Jexuan with a kind smile on his face. Now that he picked Li Jexuan back from the trash can, he had made up his mind to raise Li Jexuan. Li Jexuan looked at Medway, his face full of suspicion. The closer he looked, the more familiar the man's appearance became. The thick eyebrows, the funny watermelon head, and the weird and perverted purple tights are really weird familiarity. Is he an important figure in Hokage? Li Jexuan frowned involuntarily, but in his memory, this face never appeared in Hokage. Child, don't cry, don't cry. Medway saw the little Li Jexuan frowning, thinking that Li Jexuan was scared by herself. Don't be afraid, I'm not a bad person, Medway, I will definitely treat you and Xiao Dai brought up together. Medway, a familiar name. Li Jexuan thought to himself, but Medway was also talking to himself. You are so young, I'm afraid you can't remember your name. Medway nodded thoughtfully. Otherwise you will follow my last name and call Metkai. Metekai. Upon hearing this name, Li Jexuan's eyes suddenly stared as big as Tongling. Mat Dai, Mat Kai. No wonder he had always had a familiar feeling before, because he had indeed heard these two names before. In the Naruto manga, Matekai's name runs through the entire Naruto. One of Konoha's 12 strong leaders, Lee Luoki's master, Kakashi's best friend, was a tough man who almost kicked the finale. Of course, such a strong guy has not been born yet. Because his dad, Mat Dai, was lying beside Li Jexuan with a watermelon head, snoring cutely. Unexpectedly, I was rescued by Metkai's grandfather. Li Jexuan couldn't help but carefully looked at Medway. You know, this man's son and grandson are all men who have cultivated physical skills to the peak. However, the weird thing is, in Naruto, there seems to be no sound from Metrowe, and it doesn't even appear at all. In that case, it is very likely that Metrowe died in this first ninja war. Thinking of this, Li Jexuan couldn't help but make up his mind when looking at Metrowe's cute watermelon head. Since you saved my life today, then I will definitely not let you die like this. Li Jexuan has decided that he must save Metrowe and change his destiny. But at this moment, Li Jexuan suddenly thought of something. Metrowe, Konoha 12 years. Until now, Li Jexuan finally understood what Konoha's 12 years really meant to him. This means that the group of Konoha Xiaoqiang who opened the hangar has not been born yet, and even their parents are still babies. Under this premise, Li Jexuan can change history and completely change the destiny of many people. It is possible for him to rewrite the story of Naruto. Thinking of this, Li Jexuan trembled with excitement. Medway hugged Li Jexuan and scratched his head in doubt. Are you cold? Or is the name Metkai not good? I think it's good. I originally planned to use it for my grandson. Call. Hearing this, Li Jexuan took a deep breath. You should use it for your grandson. I have a name, Li Jexuan. Li Jexuan, is there a surname? Medway was puzzled. Knowing that it was Metkei's grandfather, Li Jexuan couldn't help speaking more casually. After all, the nickname of Metkei's family is called the existence of hot-blooded fools. It's better to get along with this kind of person directly. Sure enough, Medway didn't doubt at all why Li Jexuan, a 2-year-old child, spoke in this tone, but scratched his head very seriously. Well, Li Jexuan, it doesn't sound as good as Metkei. Li Jexuan smiled and shook his head, and jumped from Medway's arms. That warm current not only strengthened his hands, but also benefited other parts of his body more or less. Although it may not be as strong as an adult, at least he can move freely. Standing on the ground, Li Jexuan seemed to have completely integrated into the Hokage world from now on, and had a sense of stability and truth. In the early morning, in the quiet park, Li Jexuan stood among the tall trees and let out a long breath. A mat kunai appeared in Li Jexuan's sleeves. Go with. The wrist trembles lightly, and the sharp kunwu is shot out from Li Jexuan's sleeve. With a bang, Kuwu Wudu slammed into the tree trunks like a poisonous snake, and half Kuwu plunged deeply into it. This is still a hard trunk, which already possesses such destructive power. If this is a soft body. Li Jexuan waved his hand gently, the matte color disappeared from the trunk without abruptness, and reappeared in Li Jexuan's hands. Even the most inferior treasures, the magical power belonging to treasures will not be discounted at all. Time is like water, it has been 3 days since Li Jexuan came into this world. Li Jexuan smiled and put time and space into his sleeves, turned around and walked towards Medway's home. That's all for today's training, Medway, he should also be back. 10 minutes later, Li Jexuan returned to the simple room. Jia-zan, are you back? Medway squatted on the ground, carefully sorting the various herbs in the herbal basket. Li Jexuan nodded, but couldn't help thinking in his heart. After several days of life, Li Jexuan discovered that Medway would go out of the village every morning and night to pick herbs. Although Medway is a ninja, he is so poor because of these herbs. Except for picking herbs and exercising physical skills, he has no time to complete the ninja mission. Otherwise, even if he just endured it, with the high salary of a ninja, it is impossible to live in such an embarrassment. Uncle Medway, what are these herbs used for? Li Jexuan squinted his eyes. If he had a good estimate, these herbs might be one of the important reasons for the success of the Medway family. These are for bathing. Medway didn't intend to conceal the slightest bit, smiled and raised his arms to show the muscles. After every exercise, the body will be very tired. At this time, you must use special herbs. Take a bath. Hearing this, Li Jexuan nodded secretly. Sure enough, even though the main reason for the strong physical skills of the Medway family is hard work. But if there is no such unique secret recipe, just hard work is just a castle in the air. The body can't stand it. Why, do you want to take a bath together? Medway divided the herbs and hugged Li Jexuan with a smile. Although it is a little earlier, but if you want to practice physical skills, you and Xiaodai can take a bath with me in the future. Hearing this, even Li Jexuan couldn't help but feel a little moved. The so-called poor culture and wealth, even in the world of Hokage, this sentence also applies. Practicing physical skills obviously consumes more resources than practicing ninjutsu. This is also one of the reasons why Medway is so poor. Although he are not relatives, Medway allowed himself to enjoy expensive medicated baths for free, and his effects were diminished. I want to learn physical skills. Li Jexuan nodded, but quickly shook his head. However, I will handle the herbal medicine myself. It wasn't that Li Jexuan wanted to be strong, but that it would be better for one person to take a medicated bath than 3 people together. Perhaps this is also the reason why the Mat family is stronger than one generation. Hearing Li Jexuan's words, Mat Dai didn't say anything, but scratched his head and looked a little confused. Summary Jexuan, these herbs are not cheap if you buy them. How much is it? 100,000 taels. Hearing this number, Li Jexuan nodded slightly. This is indeed a lot of money. For a ninja to complete a B-level mission, maybe only 100,000 taels. However, Li Jexuan smiled and shook his head. Don't worry, I will do it myself. Before he finished speaking, Li Jexuan's head suddenly popped a line. Survival mission. Make money, ninja. Quest content. A penny to stump heroes. A man can have no wife, and he can't be without money for a day. Earn 10 million taels at the fastest speed. Task reward. Unknown, changes over time. Task time. Unlimited. There is a new mission. Li Jexuan smiled and shrugged. The system really looks at me. Early in the morning, the familiar park. Li Jexuan sighed deeply. Time and space Kuwu pulsed flexibly between his 5 fingers. However, he is really not in the mood to train Kuwu throwing now. The profit-making survival mission has been hanging in his head for 3 days. But in these 3 days, he didn't even make a penny. Naruto world is completely different from previous lives, and most people here use technology to eat. The business of buying and reselling can only be made by traders across several countries. Not to mention that the entire ninja world is in wartime, and there are taboos that cannot be interfered everywhere. Li Jexuan sighed for a long time. Unexpectedly, as a traveler, I couldn't find any business opportunities. It's really shameful. But the cowhide has been blown out, and he can't make any money, so he is embarrassed to go to the medicated bath of Medway and his son. Without a medicated bath, there is no way to practice physical skills. But when Li Jexuan was sighing, there was a sudden noise of children outside the park. Don't come over. The bruised boy stumbled into the park. The high-necked bunting kimono was embroidered with a red and white fan with the Uchiha clan logo. The Uchiha clan. Li Jexuan cautiously hid behind the tree, thinking involuntarily. It is Konoha's 12 years, and the Uchiha family's status is still very lofty. Who will it be? How dare to beat Uchiha's children like this? At this moment, a lovely loli with yellow-brown hair followed in pursuit. But it is completely different from her cute appearance. Little Lori's cute face is full of demonic grin, holding her pink fist and grinning. Little Hairtail, if you dare to speak ill of people behind your back, you must do it well. Prepare to pay the price. Wow! Uchiha Dayu held the swelling bag on his head and cried into tears, and said aggrieved, "It's not that I call you weird girl, it's my cousin." I know, but... The cute little Lori grinned slowly and raised her fist, and slammed Uchiha's head with a fierce punch. You guy, isn't you screaming now? Fishing law enforcement, Chigukuo's fishing law enforcement. Tsunade, don't be too arrogant, we Uchiha are not afraid of your 1,000 hands. Uchiha Dayu scratched his neck and moved his family out. This is the confidence that belongs to their Uchiha clan. Who would have thought that no one cared about his Uchiha family identity at all? Once Tsunade heard the name, he fought even more vigorously. As for Li Jexuan, who was hiding behind the tree, Uchiha didn't throw anything at all. He was already shocked by the identity of Lori. Tsunade. This cute little loli turned out to be Tsunade. Among Naruto, the most popular Naruto 5 generations, Tsunade Hime. The princess of the 1,000 Hands clan, the hero Jilai also thought of a beautiful woman who hadn't touched half of her life. As soon as Li Jexuan determined Tsunade's identity, a line suddenly appeared in his mind. Novice task. Defeat Tsunade. Task content. The Child King Tsunade is overbearing. As a righteous ninja, you have to defeat Tsunade and save the oppressed children from the nightmare. Task reward. Chakra under Ninja Foundation. Task time. 5 minutes. Upon seeing this, Li Jexuan couldn't help but get excited. It is natural to follow Kateway to practice physical skills, but chakra is the foundation of this world after all. However, defeating Tsunade. This is Tsunadeheim, who is called Konoha Sanin, the strange girl. If it were Tsunade 20 years later, Li Jexuan would definitely give up this task. But now, Li Jexuan grinned involuntarily, although it was difficult, but it was not without chance. Kid, let me go that girl. Let me come. Li Jexuan jumped out of the woods, and his righteous eyes stared at the blank Uchiha Dayu. After a while, Uchiha Dayu reacted. You guy, are you blind? Obviously Tsunade was clutching his neck, and it was him who was beaten. Uchiha Dayu glared at Li Jexuan angrily. Also, you commoner, how dare you talk to the great Uchiha like this? The stinky farts of the Uchiha family really come from the same line. Li Jexuan pouted his lips in disdain. What great Uchiha clan? Obviously, after the end of the war, Konoha has been ostracized by Konoha, and as a result, he has been arrogant and unable to recognize the situation. In the end, he was wiped out by his family's genius, Uchiha Itachi. The Uchiha family is destined to be a tragedy. Thinking of this, Lee Jexuan couldn't help but feel a little more pity in his eyes looking at Dai Yu. This Uchiha on behalf of the reign, probably will not die well. You civilians are not allowed to look at me with such a look. It has always been their Uchiha clan who pity others, where they have been pitiful. Uchiha's self-esteem has been hit harder than ever. Okay, I see. Little hairtail. Lee Jexuan looked at Uchiha Daiyu dozingly. This child shouldn't have lived well for many years. Even though Tsunade had been beaten into an inhuman form, Uchiha Daiyu still couldn't tolerate the insult of Lee Jexuan, a commoner. Okay. Surprisingly, Tsunade actually let go of his hand and stood aside in time. It's really interesting. Tsunade stared at Lee Jexuan closely. This was the first time she had seen such an interesting thing. There will be civilians looking at the Uchiha clan members with such eyes, and this guy looks a little smaller than her. As soon as Uchiha Daiyu landed, he roared and rushed towards Lee Jexuan. Boy, I want you to understand and insult the Uchiha clan. Seeing Uchiha rushing over on behalf of you, Lee Jexuan subconsciously jerked his sleeves, and time and space almost shot. But fortunately, Lee Jexuan finally reacted. With his current power, if time and space are used, Uchiha will undoubtedly die on behalf of you. Although the Uchiha family is destined to be destroyed in a few decades, it is as simple as squeezing the ants to kill Lee Jexuan now. It's better to use stones. Lee Jexuan bent down and picked up a small stone, his wrist trembling slightly. Uchiha Daiyu could not even react. The small stone with the big thumb accurately hit the hemp tendons on his knee. What? Uchiha's legs softened involuntarily, and the whole person rolled several times like a ground gourd. In the end, he threw himself in front of Lee Jexuan with a dusty face and fainted simply. The child was not easy. First he was beaten up by Tsunade brutally and inhumanely, and then he was humiliated wildly by Lee Jexuan. Just fainted and said to him, maybe it's a good thing. Lee Jexuan couldn't help but sighed. Bullying a child is really what he wanted. Seeing this, Tsunade couldn't help but his eyes lit up, and he slowly lowered his hand. She obviously didn't expect that a civilian dressed like Lee Jexuan would have such a method. However, now, she won't have to rescue her. Interesting. Tsunade's cute eyes stared at Lee Jexuan tightly. Who are you? Lee Jexuan. What a weird name. Tsunade looked at Lee Jexuan and raised his fist with a smile. However, Lee Jexuan, you have to know, I don't need your help to deal with that kind of guy. Lee Jexuan nodded clearly. I know, I'm not here to help you either. Oh, Tsunade was a little surprised. I'm here to challenge you. Lee Jexuan dropped the stone in his hand, swinging his wrist gently, and the time and space in his sleeve slipped quietly. Challenge me. Seeing Kuwu in Lee Jexuan's hands, Tsunade couldn't help but narrowed his eyes, raised his fist, and said with a grin, since I went to school, no one has dared to challenge me for a long time. Seeing, a big battle is on the horizon. No, you misunderstood. Lee Jexuan waved his hand suddenly, took out a square stone from his pocket, and gently carved a few dots with Kuwu. This is a dice. While talking, Lee Jexuan took out a pile of leaves from his pocket again. This is called a leaf card. I will use this to defeat you. Lee Jexuan smiled. These are all very interesting things. Seeing Lee Jexuan put away kunai, Tsunade didn't care. Anyway, the meal of beating the octopus today was considered enjoyable. What makes her care more is these novel gadgets. I can't say why, these things seem to have a special attraction to her. What are these? The cute Tsunade stretched out his head curiously, and couldn't take care of anything else. It's on the set. Lee Jexuan grinned involuntarily. He knew it from the time he received this task. Wanting to defeat the Princess Tsunade of Senju by force, this is completely idiotic, and so Lee Jexuan had no choice but to take the fabled big fat sheep Tsunade into the gambling way in advance. 10 minutes later, Lee Jexuan released his hand, the simple dice rolled gently on the ground, and finally stopped steadily. 2. Ha 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 ha, this will make you lose. Tsunade picked up the dice and laughed. In such a short time, she had lost tens of thousands of taels, and she could finally win it back. While talking, Tsunade threw out the dice confidently. Gu Lulu. The dice rolled gently on the ground. Tsunade was very confident. She was taught by many strong people since she was a child. It is too simple to control the dice to roll to 6. Sure enough, the dice gradually stopped, and the top number was indeed 6. Seeing this, Tsunade's mouth couldn't help but pick up. But at this moment, a strange breeze was blowing. Gu Lu. The dice rolled slightly under the wind. 1. How can this be? Tsunade sat on the ground with a surprised butt, and his pink and cute face was full of incredulous surprise. As expected, Li Jexuan smiled and picked up the dice, and stretched out his hand toward Tsunade. Master Tsunade Heim, I beg you on this matter. In addition to money, Li Jexuan also bet some interesting things with Tsunade. Tsunade slapped Li Jexuan's hand a little angrily. I know, you guy, you were really lucky enough to win this princess so many. This is where Li Jexuan's luck is good, obviously your luck is too bad. While talking, Tsunade scratched his head in distress. However, the second grandfather will definitely not agree. Now, I can only go to the grandfather. Grandpa. Li Jexuan's eyes widened. If he remembered correctly, Tsunade's second grandfather is the second generation of Naruto Senzuma. That grandfather is naturally Senjuzuma, known as the ***** of ninjas. The mansion of the Thousand Hands clan. An hour ago, Li Jexuan couldn't think of anything. I was able to come to the family residence called Senjujuma, the ***** of ninjas so soon. In the tall courtyard, the flowers and plants are fragrant, the rockery is rugged, and the rare treasures are dizzying. The mansion of the Thousand Hands clan is like a graceful lady, quiet, gentle and noble. But Li Jexuan followed closely behind Tsunade, not even daring to lift his head. Because he knew that under this seemingly peaceful mansion, he didn't know how many ninjas were hiding in the dark, staring at him closely. However, the news that Shinsho Zujian was still alive really surprised Li Jexuan. Because according to previous Hokage fans, in Konoha's 12 years, Senjujuma should have died long ago. But now, this person who should have died is still alive. Li Jexuan quickly adjusted his mentality. After all, the entire era of Konoha's 12 years is vague in Hokage's records. It's not surprising that Senshozuma lived longer than expected. Just thinking about it, Tsunade suddenly stopped with a grin. Arrived. He opened the paper and pushed the door. On the bright tatami, the young and handsome Senjuzuma was sitting at the low table, and smiled and stretched out his hand to Tsunade. Xiao Tsunade, how come to see Grandpa in time today? What's the curse? With that said, Shinsho Zujian glanced at Li Jexuan meaningfully. Tsunade plunged into Senjuju's arms, twisting and coquettishly like a little loach. Grandpa, can't I see you if I am fine? People just miss you. Seeing this, Li Jexuan's original low head was lowered involuntarily. It was really unexpected that Tsunade, who was like a female Tyrannosaurus, would act like this. Li Jexuan couldn't help but fill up his mind, and Tsunade, who became an adult, acted like this in July's arms. Li Jexuan couldn't help but shudder. It was really a nightmare. A sense of violation. However, Senjuzuma really knew her little granddaughter enough, and she smiled and shook her head. You girl, don't want to make me happy, just say something quickly. Did you beat the Uchiha family, or broke some treasure? Neither. Tsunade jumped out of Senjuwan's arms and smiled grinningly. I just played dice and lost something in the bet. Dice. Senshozuma widened his eyes and said in surprise, who taught you to play this? Tsunade didn't hesitate, and sold Li Jexuan who was standing aside. It's me. Li Jexuan raised his head with a funny wry smile on his small face. Seeing this, Senjuwan unconsciously spouted a sip of tea, and shouted in surprise, this little guy turned out to be my first. Senjuzuzu also likes to gamble very much, and his luck is also bad. In other words, Tsunade's addiction to gambling was completely caused by Senjuzuma. Even after Senju Junma was resurrected, he was very happy to see Tsunade inherited his will to gamble. Unexpectedly, you kid turned out faster than me. Shinshozuma mumbled and shook his head, and looked at Li Jexuan a little weirdly. Boy, if you let that guy in Feijian know, you're really going to be bad. Li Jexuan naturally didn't dare to talk casually in front of Shinshujujian, but smiled awkwardly. Compared with the unscrupulous Zujian, the brothers Shujian is an old-fashioned one. If you let him know about this. Okay, Tell me, what on earth did you win from our Tsunade? Senjuzuma seemed to have thought of something, and he patted the table and laughed. If it's Kazuna's heart, you can just take it. Hearing this, Lee Jexuan couldn't help but curled his lips. What the ***** was this guy talking about? The personality of the first generation is indeed the same as the rumors, how can I say? A bit rude. It's admission. Do you want to enter the Ninja Academy? Chinsho Zujian looked at Lee Jexuan in surprise, his eyes a little strange. I want to be a qualified ninja. Lee Jexuan stared at the Chinsho Zujian with piercing eyes, and his small eyes were full of perseverance and determination. Feeling Lee Jexuan's sincerity, Chinsho Zujian's face became even more strange, and he thought to himself, does this little guy know what he is doing? You have to think carefully, the principal of the Ninja Academy is just a fate. Speaking of her staid brother, Senju Junma couldn't help but laughed. You just taught Tsunade to gamble and entered his school. I'm afraid there will be no good fruit. Chinsho Zujian didn't save any face for Chinsho Fujian, and made it clear that Chinsho Fujian would wear little shoes for Lee Jexuan. In fact, the first generation has always been such a naive, enthusiastic, and lovely man with the world in mind. I know this, but I must enter the Ninja Academy. Pick up the brick, I can't hug you. Put down the bricks, I can't feed you. In this case, Lee Jexuan chose to let you hold the brick, and I hold you. Ordinary ninjas without a family, if they don't enter the Ninja Academy, they can only be cannon fodder in their lives. Seeing Lee Jexuan's persistence, Chinshojian finally nodded. Although most of the recruits in the school are the heirs of major families, as long as Chinshojian speaks, Lee Jexuan's admission is settled. I will arrange for you to enroll. On September 10th, you can report directly to the school. Lee Jexuan curled his lips involuntarily. Even if he fled to the world of Hokage, he couldn't avoid the nightmare day of September 10th. After achieving his goal, Lee Jexuan naturally left. The first generation will not keep him for dinner. After all, their relationship is not so close. It's been a long delay outside today, maybe Metroe should be anxious. Lee Jexuan smiled and shook his head. He had no family in his previous life. Unexpectedly, when I came here, I also experienced the feeling of worrying others. However, when Lee Jexuan opened the dilapidated door, Metroe nodded as usual, and lowered his head to deal with the herbs. Okay, Lee Jexuan nodded in a daze. After a while, he couldn't help asking, don't you want to ask me what I did? Hearing this, Metroe kept saying, I knew from the beginning that you are different from ordinary children. I want you to have your own things to do. Turns out, did Metroe already know it? As expected, Metroe is just a simple character, but not stupid. It was natural to see something in so many days, but he didn't say anything. In his opinion, he shouldn't inquire about the secret that Lee Jexuan didn't want to tell. You guy is really. Lee Jexuan was a little moved. He finally understood why so many people like the unpretentious Metroe. I want to practice physical skills. Lee Jexuan gave all the 100,000 won from Tsunade to Metroe. After receiving the money, Metroe's eyes suddenly became more serious than ever before, and he stared at Lee Jexuan closely. Are you sure you want to practice physical skills with me? This is very tiring. Not only is it very tiring, it is simply an inhuman exercise method. But, I confirm, Lee Jexuan nodded resolutely. No matter how hard it is, I will stick to it. Lee Jexuan and Metroe faced each other. The eyes of one large and one small pair of eyes met in the air and collided fiercely. For a while, as if feeling something, Metroe grabbed the money abruptly and ordered, I'm going to buy herbs. During the time I am back, I will do 500 push-ups. As soon as he finished speaking, Metroe jumped out in a leapfrog manner. Children under the age of 2 have to do 500 push-ups. If this brutal training method is placed in Lee Jexuan's world, it will definitely be on QQ News. But Lee Jexuan knew that this level was not even a warm-up for the physique of the Metroe family. Come on, let me see how far I can do it. As soon as Metroe left, Lee Jexuan also leaned down. His whole body was tightly stretched like steel bars, and the muscles that were not obvious on his arms could not help but tremble slightly. But after doing a faint soreness came out of Lee Jexuan's bones. Babies are babies not only because of their weak strength, but also because of their soft bones. Lee Jexuan was panting heavily. and the hot air wave hit the floor fiercely, stirring up waves of dust. 183, 184. Except for these numbers, Li Jexuan's mind now can't think of anything. As if the meaning of his life is to let these numbers grow slowly. Every meridian, every muscle is wailing, using a way of producing a lot of lactic acid to remind him that you have reached the limit. Give up, it's already pretty good to do so much. No, don't be kidding. This is far from my limit. Li Jexuan's eyes reddened and roared. A new force seemed to gush out from all over his body. 189.190.191. Immediately afterwards, Li Jexuan exploded, and his arms slammed into force. The whole person was like a small pile driver, and the number of push-ups increased rapidly in the passage of time. 231. But when this number appeared, Li Jexuan's whole body seemed to lose weight suddenly. No matter how Li Jexuan's spirit was urged, his body did not react at all, just fell straight to the ground. It's the limit. This is not the limit of Li Jexuan, but it is the limit of this baby's body. 231. Li Jexuan watched his body slowly approach the floor and was about to fall into the dust. A pair of warm hands suddenly caught him. Medway, back, Uncle Medway. Li Jexuan looked at the sweaty Medway and smiled helplessly. I haven't completed the task, 231 is already my limit. Although he didn't complete the task, Li Jexuan had a clear conscience in his heart, because he consciously reached his limit, however. No, this is far from your limit. Medway grabbed Li Jexuan's arm. The human body has no limits. Hearing this, Li Jexuan couldn't help but feel a little unconvinced, but just now, I really ran out of strength. I tried my best to make about 20 more. No, training is not desperate. Medway gently massaged Li Jexuan's arm and said, do you still remember 185? At that time, you were obviously about to reach your limit. Why did you have more power? Extreme reaction, Li Jexuan blurted out involuntarily. Medway nodded slightly. In fact, extreme reactions are the reason why the human body has no limits. Every time you limit it, as long as you clenched your teeth and persisted, your body will always provide you with new strength. Speaking of this, Medway's expression suddenly became serious. However, this strength is not for you to explode. It's what makes you stick to the next extreme. Speaking of this, Medway stared at Li Jexuan closely. Remember, training did not break out. Breaking out means giving up. Breaking out means giving up. Li Jexuan seemed to be struck by a flash of lightning, and the whole person muttered to himself involuntarily, so, is this the reason why Emperor Kai is so powerful? In this case, when I cook the herbs, I will do 500 squats. Having said that, Medway unceremoniously placed Li Jexuan on the ground, ignoring Li Jexuan's just collapsed body. As soon as his feet touched the ground, a weak sense of emptiness struck straight, and Li Jexuan staggered and almost fell directly. What? Li Jexuan roared and stood firmly on his heels, as if all his strength was used to stand. Every bit of body weight was a great torture to Li Jexuan now. Even so, Medway didn't mean to pity Li Jexuan at all, but just threw the herbs into the casserole and boiled pots of viscous soup. How can you give up? Li Jexuan gritted his teeth, his knees bent slightly, his whole body sinking slowly like a rusty robot. 1. The body that is already extremely tired, even if only one is done, it has reached the extreme. The strands of power came out of Li Jexuan's limbs, like weeds in the cracks of the stone. What? Li Jexuan exhaled fiercely, and squatted again. 2. This time, Li Jexuan did not rely on the new strength to explode, but preserved his strength, moving forward smoothly one by one. Hoo. 12. Li Jexuan exhaled loudly, and the long airflow formed a white mist that filled the air. After the first pull, the new strength has disappeared, but the new pull has not yet appeared. Li Jexuan stood there blankly, his eyes gradually becoming hollow, and his body was almost collapsed. With continuous extreme training, Li Jexuan's spirit could not help but loosen a little. But at this moment, a thunderous voice rang in Li Jexuan's ears. Patience and persistence are the only way to surpass genius. Medway roared. Don't lose to will, your body is not at its limit. Yes, Li Jexuan woke up in a trance, his small face turned red, and his trembling white calf slowly bent again. 13. When Li Jexuan stood up again, a different look suddenly appeared in his eyes. Extremely. Appeared again. This time, he finally insisted on reaching the second extreme. 14. Li Jexuan roared and crossed the second pole, and the new strength appeared again. Li Jexuan seemed to be reborn, and he could clearly feel that he had made a new breakthrough. Character: Li Jexuan, Xian. 6. Indicating the amount of knowledge and the level of IQ. Fine. 0. Indicating the energy that is the foundation of the chakra. Print. 0. Indicating mastery and proficiency of seal and mudra. Body. 0.5. Indicating the ability to master physical skills and the ability to use it skillfully. Forbearance. 0. Indicating the ability to master ninjutsu and the ability to use it skillfully. Magic. 0. Indicating the ability to master illusion and the ability to use it skillfully. Speed. 0.5. Indicating speed and sensitivity of movement and reaction. Force. 1. Start with wrist strength and foot strength to express the physical strength of the whole body. The data is calculated by this system based on healthy adults. The calm voice of the system made Li Jexuan feel at ease for the first time. The power of one means that I already have the power of an adult. Li Jexuan fell down with a smile. He couldn't find any strength all over his body. But before he fell down, Medway reached out and hugged him, took off his clothes in twos, and threw it into a huge clay pot. Well, Li Jexuan groaned comfortably, and slowly opened his eyes. The sky is already bright again, and he actually slept like this all night. And Li Jexuan realized that he was lying in a clay pot, and more importantly, there was a fire under this pot. Turning his head, there is a larger clay pot beside it, and Medway is also lying in it. You're awake. Realizing that Li Jexuan was awake, Medway smiled and nodded to Li Jexuan. This medicine is still effective for half an hour, don't waste it. As he said that, Medway closed his eyes again and sat in the clay pot slumbering. Seeing this skillful look, he is definitely not doing this for the first time. It was just that when Li Jexuan was asleep before, Medway was still exercising. When Li Jexuan woke up, Medway had already gone out, and he had not been able to find out. After calming down, Li Jexuan realized that the warm medicated bath was digging into the depths of his body. These warm forces gently stroked his tired muscles and bones. After only soaking for the whole night, his body that had been relieved several times last night could not find any signs of soreness and fatigue. Even more terrifying is that his attributes have undergone new changes. Character: Li Jexuan, Xian. 6. Fine. 0. Print. 0. Body. 0.5. Forbearance. 0. Magic. 0. Speed. 0.5. Force. 1.5. Li Jexuan couldn't help but clenched his fist gently, and the surging power suddenly exploded in Li Jexuan's palm. The little baby's palm actually shook the sound of a tiger. Such power. It was just a medicinal bath, and his power actually increased by half a person. In case, just as Li Jexuan was thinking about it, Medway raised his eyelids again. It's only the first time that the medicated bath has such an improvement. Don't think about taking shortcuts. Hearing this, Li Jexuan couldn't help but smiled awkwardly, constricted his mind, slowly closed his eyes, and quietly enjoyed the last half an hour. Whether to receive quest rewards. Sha Ninja Basic Chakra. No, Li Jexuan shook his head slightly. Now is not the time to receive this chakra. After all, he is a war orphan, and he learned to chakra without a professor. This is too suspicious. Because of Tsunade's relationship, Konoha has already begun to notice himself. From now on, you must be careful in doing things, otherwise the mountain family's heart-turning and mind-reading skills will definitely make him regret coming here. Ha! Li Jexuan let out a long sigh, summoning time and space Kuwu to play with it gently. Only by being intimate with his own weapon can he exert 100% of his power. It seems that I already have a certain level of strength, at least I won't be easily killed by ordinary people. Li Jexuan gently turned the hollow round handle of the time and space, and his eyes gradually became cold. Find an opportunity, maybe I should visit Tsuruda, thank you for his kindness in nurturing me. Novice task, phased task, kill Tsuruda. Task content. The gentleman takes revenge, the sooner the better. Task reward. Kunai throw intermediate. Mission time limit. 1 week. But Li Jexuan suddenly turned aside the calendar. September 8th, only 2 days before the start of ninja school. Ha, Hachan, keep your dog's head for a few days. Li Jexuan stood up fiercely from the clay pot, and the 1-year-old baby arrogantly clenched his fist. When I go to school, I will come to take your dog's life. Just, how do you feel, Chili? Li Jexuan lowered his head and found that he didn't seem to be wearing anything. The guy Mad Dai stripped him naked and threw him in. But, September 10th. In this nightmare day, Li Jexuan once again embarked on the road of learning. Kanai and Rice *******, are you ready? Medway looked at Li Jexuan, who had been cleaned up, and instructed over and over again. The Ninja Academy is the heir of a big family, don't cause trouble. Li Jexuan nodded helplessly. Could it be that in Medway's heart, he is a guy who likes to make trouble? I am a pacifist, and if people don't offend me, I don't offend others. If anyone commits me. Soon, Tsunade arrived as promised. Today Tsunade dresses up extraordinarily cute. The two soaring braids like a hedgehog are in line with Tsunade's fangs and claws. The pink dress is fluffy and stretched, and the blush on his face is as attractive as a red apple. Let's go to school together. Suna took Li Jexuan's hand and walked, saying, I heard that Grandpa Second will be back today. Thousands of hands will come back. Li Jexuan's eyes narrowed involuntarily, and now the Chinsho Zuma retreated to the second line, and it was the second-generation Phaegian who was in power. But I didn't expect that the First Ninja World War was fought so fiercely that Chinshojian had to rush back from the battlefield. Thinking of this, Li Jexuan couldn't help but shrank his neck. I just hope that Senjumama will not take him to heart, otherwise he will be really miserable this time, and he will bring Tsunade into the abyss of gambling. This matter varies from person to person, but it can be big or small. However, when Tsunade brought Li Jexuan to the door of the Ninja Academy, the memories of Li Jexuan's brain flooded all of a sudden. In front of the gate of the Ninja Academy, the huge locust tree stretched out tall and straight, and a small swing hung on the thick trunk. It turns out that this swing has been there so early. Li Jexuan couldn't help but sighed. He was full of affection for this place when he read the comics in his previous life. Because this is the most famous background board when Naruto Uzumaki is alone. The other children were picked up by their parents, and only Naruto, who had the power of a fox demon, sat alone on the swing. Come on, let's go in. Tsunade pulled Li Jexuan. Well, let's go in. Li Jexuan recovered, strode into the Ninja Academy, and made up his mind secretly. Naruto, I have read all your stories. Now that I am here, let me create a completely different story. Li Jexuan laughed and walked into the Ninja Academy. Does it make you so happy if you get into the school by means of indiscriminate means? Chinshojian stared at Li Jexuan coldly, and beside him, there were several familiar faces. The 3 generations of Hokage in the teenage years, Sarutobi Hisaki, and the master of the future roots, the back of Konoha Danzo. They are all the first graduates of the academy, and they will become indispensable and important figures of Konoha in the future. Li Jexuan couldn't think that he would be so unlucky. As soon as I entered the school, I ran into a collision with Chinsho, who had just rushed back. But now it looks, Chinshojian's first impression of Li Jexuan was really not good, or disgusting. From the point of view of the upright Chinshojian, Li Jexuan was an opportunistic and shameless guy. If it hadn't been for his elder brother Senjujuma would never let a worm like Li Jexuan enter the Ninja Academy. Li Jexuan did not argue against this misunderstanding, because he knows that this kind of prejudice on impression is meaningless. Seeing that Li Jexuan didn't answer, Chinshojian didn't care. Only when Li Jexuan was frightened by him, he turned his lips and left. On the contrary, Sarutobi risen on the side smiled friendly towards Li Jexuan. As for Danzo, he didn't even look at Li Jexuan at all. After everyone walked in, Li Jexuan followed them into the academy. He struggled to enter the Ninja Academy, so naturally he would not choose to leave because of 1 or 2 ugly words. On the contrary, the more others look down on him, the more he will do his best. Let everyone see who is the real ninja. I announce that starting today, it will officially change its name to Ninja Academy. Standing on the high podium, Senjuma officially confirmed the name and rules of the Ninja Academy. Konoha 12 Years Ninja Academy is officially established. Since then, Konoha's ninja training has been separated from the family-style small workshop training. Handed over to the Ninja Academy to teach, until a qualified ninja is trained, he can be called a qualified Konoha ninja. Hello everyone, I am your teacher Yamada II. With a cigarette in his mouth, Yamada Seiyuki pushed the Konoha protector on his forehead to one side and raised his eyebrows lazily. Presumably you all know what system Master Shwema has established. In the audience, a group of 3 or 4-year-old children looked at him with piercing eyes. In addition to the previous system, Lord Shwema deliberately added the last elimination system this year. Speaking of this, Yamada Shizuyuki's tone could not help but become colder. This means that starting this year, every year will be one person was eliminated. When it came to this, everyone turned their eyes to Lee Jexuan. Obviously, they all believe that Lee Jexuan will definitely be eliminated. Don't do this, everyone, although I look handsome, this is by no means the only reason you fall in love with me. Lee Jexuan smiled and ridiculed, but there was an uproar in his heart. In the original historical process, there was no such thing. Otherwise, Naruto would have dropped out of school long ago. Unexpectedly, it changed history for the first time. It turned out to be like this. Through Senjukuma's dislike of herself, the school rules of the Ninja Academy were changed. However, do you think I will be eliminated? Lee Jexuan kept his lips secretly, after several days of exercise and medicated bath. His power attribute alone has reached the power of 2 people. Just fighting strength, Lee Jexuan is not inferior to the descendants of the Chu Dao family. As for Chakra, the chakra stored in the system is enough for him to catch up with the favorites of these big families. Seeing everyone's gaze, Yamada Ziji couldn't help but raised his eyebrows. It seemed that this little guy was Lee Jexuan. Thousands of hands will not reprimand a new student for no reason. In fact, although Chinshofu is rigid, he is still a good person in his bones. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to become Hokage. Today, let's talk about the basics of ninja. The reason why ninjas are powerful is based on ninjutsu, physique, and illusion. Seeing that the children under the podium were not interested, Yamada nodded his head knowingly. These, I think your family has taught you all, so I won't say more. However, Lee Jexuan had an opinion. Others have heard it, but he has never heard of it. Teacher, I haven't heard of it. Lee Jexuan stood up directly. He came to the school to systematically learn the knowledge of ninjas and narrow the gap between him and the heirs of the big family. Naturally, he would not be silent in this situation. Faced with Lee Jexuan's questioning, Yamada II did not explain anything, but just nodded. Okay, since some students have questions, then I will start from the beginning. Ever since, a whole day passed by Yamada Seiyuki's narration. On the way, from time to time, murderous eyes shot towards Lee Jexuan. Obviously watched a popular science video, press your head to watch it again, this is undoubtedly a chore. Before he knew it, Lee Jexuan had offended the entire class. However, Lee Jexuan was complacent. From time to time, I took a few notes, and didn't pay attention to those who wanted to kill. A joke, if the eyes can kill. No, it seems that many of the pupil techniques mentioned by Yamada Jiyuki can be done. It's not the world it used to be, and the look in your eyes can really kill people. Write it down. This kid is really arrogant. Yes, he is a commoner. I heard that I was reprimanded by Master Phagian today. This kid, I must make him look good. Jingle bell. When the bell rang after class, trouble came to the door. You kid, you caused us to waste a whole day. It is the children of the Hyuga family who are leading the charge, and behind him are the children of some small families. Facing the provocation, Lee Jexuan sat firmly in the chair, and raised his eyebrows until he cleared up his notes. Are you? Lee Jexuan didn't take the fight rashly. Although he was good now, there were still a few guys who made him jealous. Dashimaru, the sons of these big families are all geniuses who graduated from the battlefield at the age of 6. If Lee Jexuan now played against them, the outcome would be unpredictable. But if it's a cannon fodder who has never heard of a name, then... My name is Hyuga Yizu. You, a commoner, have completely irritated me. Hyuga Yizu looked down at Lee Jexuan proudly. It's fine for you guy to get in here through despicable means. You dare to provoke me. Master, I really don't know how to live or die. Let's hit. Huh, what? Hyuga Yuzuo was taken aback. Hearing a name that was not familiar to him, Lee Jexuan stood up neatly and took out time and space kunai from his sleeves. Aren't you going to have a fight? Lee Jexuan is going to challenge him. Hyuga Yizu was stunned. but his younger brother jumped out and sneered and yelled, "You are seeking your own death. Brother Yizu has developed the genius of chakra. Ha ha, such a small thing is nothing to me." Being praised by the younger brother, Hyuga smiled contentedly. "Do you still fight?" I rushed home. Lee Jexuan grabbed his backpack and wanted to leave. "I don't have the time to play with you little kids." When Lee Jexuan goes home, he will have to undergo Medaway Hell-style extreme training. Besides, when these little kids were 3 or 4 years old, they started forming gangs to make trouble. If this is on Earth, your ***** will be broken. But this time, Hyuga was completely angered. "Little kid, who on earth are you talking about? They are all 4 or 5 years old, and the youngest is more than 3 years old." Lee Jexuan, who was more than 1 year old, stood in front of them with a full head. "Very well, you successfully angered me. Originally, I was just going to teach you casually, but now." As Hyuga Yizu said, he took out 2 long bandages from his pocket and wrapped them around his hands. "I hope you will be so confident when you kneel down and beg for mercy." At this moment, the system suddenly issued a new task. Daily task: defeat the opponent. Task content: in the face of the provocation of the kid, as a man determined to become the king of the kid, you have to solve the opponent simply and neatly. Task reward: primary treasure chest. Seeing this, Lee Jexuan shook his head helplessly, and could only follow Hyuga Yizu out of the school. "If you don't convince this guy, there will only be more trouble behind. Be careful, although this guy is useless, he can still play 8 palms." When Tsunade passed by Lee Jexuan's side, he suddenly reminded in a low voice, "You fellow, don't let me carry you back." Hearing this, Lee Jexuan smiled and nodded. Tsunade really is just like what he said in the previous life. He is strong on the outside and soft on the inside. He is the best choice for a wife. Ahem, what am I thinking? Tsunade is still a 2-year-old child. But, the kid's man. When Lee Jexuan's cranky thoughts ended, Hyuga Yizu had already set his posture in the open space in front of the Ninja Academy. Hyuga is already 4 years old, and he is more than half taller than Lee Jexuan. Lee Jexuan seems to have lost more than half of his momentum. "What about your starting style?" Seeing that Lee Jexuan was just standing there lazily, Hyuga frowned. Although it was a private fight, he didn't want to carry the notoriety of sneak attack. "You don't need to be so serious about dealing with you." Lee Jexuan pulled out his ears indifferently, as if he didn't put Hyuga Yizu in his eyes. What an arrogant kid. He dares to relax so much in the face of the benefits of the Hyuga family. Isn't this guy's brain okay? Lee Jexuan didn't take my advice to heart at all. Tsunade squeezed his fist, wishing to go up and beat Lee Jexuan well now. The private fight between Lee Jexuan and Hyuga Yizu has attracted many people. The blue veins on Hyuga's forehead burst out, and he hasn't been so angry since he grew up. Undoubtedly, Lee Jexuan has completely angered him. "This is what you said." Hyuga Yizu couldn't help it anymore, exerted force under his feet, and rushed towards Lee Jexuan. Fast speed. Even Lee Jexuan has to admit that the heirs of these big families are indeed powerful, and the speed alone is far faster than ordinary children. However, after all, it was still a bit short. Hyuga Yizu deceived the body in front of Lee Jexuan, holding both palms high and roaring. Bagua 64 palms 1 palm. The right palm of Hyuga Tokatsu suddenly burned with a blue chakra flame, and Hyuga Tokatsu really mastered the chakra and already had the ability to fight. Lee Jexuan nodded secretly. The 64 palms of the gossip, as expected in anime, gathered the chakra in the palm of his hand, and quickly hit the enemy's chakra acupoint. It's a pity that Hyuga is not Neji after all, and it's not just a little bit worse. Lee Jexuan's calm observation had already figured out the strength of Hyuga Yizu. However, in the eyes of outsiders, Lee Jexuan was just shocked. But when Lee Jexuan could already feel the breeze of Hyuga's foot. Suddenly, Lee Jexuan moved. Without a large-scale movement, Lee Jexuan just turned his body slightly to let Hyuga's first palm. What? Seeing Lee Jexuan avoiding his first palm, Hyuga Yizu was also a little surprised, but he didn't panic either. Because the most notable feature of Bagua 64 palms is the continuous blows that make opponents tired of coping. Second palm. A raging blue chakra flame was also burning on Hyuga's left hand. Lee Jexuan had just turned around, and this palm seemed to be impossible to hide, and as long as this palm hits, the continuous palm hits will completely defeat Lee Jexuan. However, at this moment, Hyuga Yakuza's left hand stopped abruptly in midair, and Hyuga Yakuza forcibly terminated his own righteousness. What's the matter? Better boss, don't show mercy. Do it, boss. Hyuga Tosaku's subordinates yelled nervously, they had no idea what had happened to their boss. However, at this moment, in the shadow of the huge locust tree, the snake pupil boy with long black hair suddenly sneered, "That's it, this is not a level battle at all." After speaking, the snake eye boy turned his head and left. In his opinion, the battle was over. Tsunade's eyes widened involuntarily, and he muttered to himself involuntarily, "So, is Yushuen-kun so strong?" Ha! Hyuga Yizu's eyes widened in horror, like a sculpture, dare not to show the atmosphere. A sharp kunai hovered firmly between the eyelashes of his left eye, and the sharp blade even cut off several long eyelashes. As long as he moved a little bit, this kunai would blind his eyes. I heard that the white eyes are the most proud of the Hyuga clan. While talking, Lee Jexuan slowly leaned in the ear of Shang Hyuga Yizu. Such an important thing must be protected, kid. After finishing speaking, Lee Jexuan chuckled lightly and put away the time and space and left. Hyuga Tokazu was stupidly stunned and blushed, but he couldn't say a word. He lost completely. Hyuga Bionzu, lost. It is difficult for most of the people present to accept this fact. But for Lee Jexuan, winning this battle is really no surprise. Not to mention Hyuga's underestimate, Lee Jexuan's physique after a few days of extreme training is far stronger than Hyuga's. He is ultimately just an ordinary ninja in the Naruto world. If he is replaced by Neji Hyuga, Lee Jexuan will not be so relaxed. But anyway, this can be regarded as his first battle after coming to Naruto world. Lee Jexuan smiled and shook his head, at least the result was not bad. Open the primary treasure chest. A faint fluorescence flashed, and a light green potion suddenly appeared on Lee Jexuan's hand. Energy potion. Energy potion. Just one bottle, let your body pulse back. Lee Jexuan couldn't help but curled his lips. This was the first time he had published such a thing. Looking at this unreliable introduction, I don't know if it works. At this moment, Tsunade suddenly grabbed Lee Jexuan. Fight me. What? Lee Jexuan's eyes widened blankly. Why? Am I doing something wrong? Could it be said that this Hyuga Masashi is Tsunade's fiancé? No, isn't Tsunade's boyfriend that short-lived ghost called Suan? Tsunade stopped in front of Lee Jexuan, raised his fists and said seriously, "You obviously have a strong strength, why did you use that method to defeat me?" The innocent was despised by others. Obviously, Tsunade was making injustices for Lee Jexuan. She thinks that even if Lee Jexuan doesn't have to gamble, it is possible to defeat her and join the Ninja Academy dignifiedly. So, she wants to fight Lee Jexuan to prove this to others. What a lovely girl. Lee Jexuan smiled and shook his head, jumped up and patted Suna's head. Lee Jexuan, never do anything with cute girls. After speaking, Lee Jexuan turned around and left, leaving Tsunade alone in a daze. Lee Jexuan is still rushing home. God knows what kind of task the demon Meadowell has arranged for him today. Lee Jexuan left chicly, but Tsunade's small face turned red involuntarily. If you don't do anything with the cute girl, does Jia-zan-jun say I am cute? In Naruto world, the child's precocity is beyond the imagination of Lee Jexuan, an earthling. And hiding in the dark, Yamada, who caught all this in his eyes, smiled and shook his head. This kid is really a master of sultry. It's just that the action of him jumping up and patting his head is too funny. There is no way, after all, Lee Jexuan is half a year younger than the youngest Tsunade, and the Saruta wouldn't give him anything good. However, I should be able to grow taller soon. Lee Jexuan was doing push-ups steadily carrying the clay pot he was bathing in. On the side, Medway also carried the clay pot, ups and downs frantically. Well, I think you should be able to grow taller soon. When I was your age, I couldn't achieve this training intensity. Before the Mad Dina kid woke up, he did 500 push-ups with weights. This is the training task of the Mad family today. 334, 472, almost done. And an hour before the end of Mad Day's nap, Lee Jexuan gritted his teeth and moved forward steadily. But at this moment, Wow, Mad Dai, this nasty kid woke up early. Youth is burning. Metroway laughed and jumped up from the ground. Since it's not done, do 500 squats before the hot water boils. Without being discouraged at all, Medway immediately put in a new exercise. You guy, you really are a passionate fool. Lee Jexuan smiled and shook his head, and in a blink of an eye he gritted his teeth and roared, squat 500, I am here too. 368, 369, 432, 433. In the dilapidated room, two figures, one large and one small, were undulating frantically. But at this moment, the sound of water vapor suddenly came from the kitchen beside. The water is boiling. Ha, my whole person is going to burn. Medway wiped the sweat off his body and nodded with a smile. When I fill up the water, let's leap 500 times. You stupid. Lee Jexuan collapsed weakly on the ground. His small body was like boiled red prawns, exuding a lot of heat. Already exhausted. Gurulu. There was the sound of Medway filling water from the kitchen, and Lee Jexuan couldn't help feeling a little thirsty. By the way, the bottle of medicine that came out today. Lee Jexuan took out the green energy potion from the space in the system, opened the lid, and poured it all down. Grumbling. As soon as the pale green potion rolled into Lee Jexuan's throat, he couldn't wait to rush to Lee Jexuan's limbs. In an instant, Lee Jexuan suddenly felt that his state seemed to be fully restored. The whole person jumped up involuntarily, his eyes exuded full of vitality. It was just a bottle of medicine that swept away his fatigue, and Lee Jexuan's current state is simply better than ever. Summaries on, do you feel it too? That burning youth. Looking at Lee Jexuan, who was born again and again, Medway's eyes almost burned. Come, let us continue to exercise and burn our youth. With that, Medway put down the water bottle and pulled Lee Jexuan to train again. 500 indoor leapfrogs, it started. Half an hour later. Call. Medway could not help but breathed heavily. Summaries on, your state today is better than ever. Lee Jexuan smiled and nodded. Of course, after drinking the energy potion, he has twice the physical strength, and now he can finally overwhelm the monster Medway. After another half an hour, Medway was still panting evenly, but Lee Jexuan was already tired and paralyzed. You monster. Lee Jexuan stared at the dead fish eyes and muttered to himself before his consciousness disappeared, one day, I will defeat you. Medway smiled and shook his head gently, and skillfully took Lee Jexuan clean in twos, and threw it into a clay pot full of green soup. After doing all this, Medway smiled and pulled out a heavy load-bearing suit from under the bed, clenched his fist and said, now, we can start the formal training. 1,000 push-ups, start. The night is getting deeper. Hyuga's clean and bright training room. Yizu, I heard you lost today. The middle-aged man with the national character face stood quietly in the middle of the training room, looking at the little son who was kneeling in front of him, and he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Originally, the youngest son was particularly favored by his wife. He has never worked hard in his cultivation. This time he lost to the children of common people. I heard that the child is still an orphan. My father, it's just that the child underestimates the enemy. Hyuga foot tremblingly bowed before the mature man, not even daring to lift his head. You should know that we are not allowed to fail when we are separated. Hiromi Hyuga nodded, the curse of the bird in the cage on his forehead. We, who were born to protect the clan, will bear the name of a sinner if we fail once. Father. Hyuga Yazu was completely panicked. This was the first time his father told him such a thing. Go and defeat him. If you can't defeat him, I will send you to the country of fire. Maybe ninja is not the way for you. Hiromi Hyuga waved his hand to signal Hyuga Yoshizu to leave. Ninja, maybe not the path for you. In a dark and secluded room. Am I really not suitable to be a ninja? Hyuga Kazuki kneeled down and sat on the ground, like a kitten, helpless, weak and pitiful. However, at this moment, the door of the room was suddenly opened. Who? Yizu, it's me. I heard what you and father said just now. Here comes the elder brother of Hyuga Masazu, Hyuga Masashi. He is a gentle brother, and Hyuga has never seen him angry. But this time, the expression on Masama Hyuga's face was extremely ugly and hideous. Brother, am I really not suitable to be a ninja? When I saw my brother, Hyuga Yizu couldn't help crying and asked, Father is going to send me to the country of fire, I. Seeing his brother crying so miserably, Hyuga Ijung was in grief, did not answer to benefit his feet, but secretly gritted his teeth in his heart. Lee Jexuan, you. At the same time, in the bright training room, Hiromi Hyuga's wife suddenly walked out of the dark with tea, and said with a worried look, Haruga, are you really going to send Yizu to the country of fire? Be a commoner. Hearing what his wife said, Hiroma Hyuga couldn't help but sighed, hugged his wife, pointed to the curse mark of the bird in the cage on his head, and said, since Yizu is not suitable for being a ninja, maybe it is correct to send him to the country of fire. At least he can spend a free and easy life. That's the freedom that Hyugas dream of. After all, Hiromi Hyuga still prefers his younger son. The fate of the bird in the cage is like Ningxi, who is obviously a dragon soaring for 9 days, but is bound by a bird cage for a lifetime. The big family also has the sorrow of the big family. And Lee Jexuan, who gave birth to the center of the vortex of the event, didn't know anything about it, and was sleeping soundly in a clay pot on the boiler. Early in the morning, when the first light pierced the darkness, the precise biological clock awakened both Lee Jexuan and Medway. Well, another vibrant day. Lee Jexuan climbed out of the clay pot and laughed uncontrollably at the slowly rising sun. In just one day, his attributes have improved a lot. Character: Lee Jexuan, Xion, 6, Fine, 0, Print, 0, Body, 0.6, Forbearance, 0, Magic, 0, Speed, 0.6, Force, 3. The strength has been increased from 2 points, including related speed and physical skills. And all this is due to the magic potion of energy. Because of this medicine, Lee Jexuan's training volume has literally doubled. The truth that 1 plus 1 is greater than 2 is easy to understand. What a good thing. Lee Jexuan jumped out of the clay pot, and his thoughts began to flash up. If he has over 10,000 energy potions and finds a cave to practice hard, it may not take a few years before he can become 8-men Dunja. At that time, he punched Raikage and stepped on Feng, angering him, and pulling out the suspended Uchiha Madara was a fat beating. Hey, wake up, don't you still go to school today? Medway helped Lee Jexuan pack his backpack, and shook his head helplessly. Also, your medicated bath has been used up. Let's go clubbing with me tomorrow. The horror scene brought Lee Jexuan back to reality as soon as he thought of squeezing himself into a clay pot with Medway. Not to mention the energy potion, just the medicated bath is almost out of use. Lee Jexuan took the backpack and smiled bitterly. Don't worry about the money for the medicinal bath, I will handle it. Hearing this, Medway didn't say much anymore, and walked out with Lee Jexuan with the medicine basket on his back. One big and one small figure went in opposite directions, one went up the mountain to collect medicine, the other went to school to study. However, as soon as he walked out of the house, Lee Jexuan couldn't help but grabbed his head. Although it sounds good, Lee Jexuan really doesn't know where to get the money. Then go to Tsunade to gamble. Not to mention that I couldn't bear to bully Tsunade all the time, the guy in Senjikama would not let him go. Can I borrow money from Tsunade? Quote. Lee Jexuan couldn't help but scratched his head. Why did he only have Tsunade in his mind? Can't you change someone else? However, he seems to have only such a rich friend. Chapter 11. Hi, Jun Jexuan, what are you talking about? Tsunade suddenly jumped out of nowhere, and was startled by Lee Jexuan, who was thinking about how to cheat Tsunade's money. No, nothing, I never missed you. Lee Jexuan waved his hands repeatedly to explain, flushing involuntarily. I am a person for 2 generations at any rate, but it is too embarrassing to think about deceiving Lori money. Explaining is disguising, disguising is fact. Tsunade couldn't help but widened his eyes, and said in his heart, could it be that Jun Yuyun was thinking of me early in the morning? With a perfect score for reasoning, Lee Jexuan is indeed full of Tsunade. It's just how poor Tsunade knew, Lee Jexuan thought she was just for her money. But no matter what, Tsunade had already decided in his heart. Lee Jexuan must like her. However, what I feel about Lee Jexuan, he is indeed a very interesting person. Although she is a commoner, she is not afraid of the heirs of those big families at all. She also taught her to play a very interesting dice game. She is also very strong. One move overwhelmed the Hyuga family. Looks. Tsunade couldn't help but quietly glanced at Lee Jexuan. At dawn, the first light golden sunlight just fell, spreading on Li Jexuan's handsome side face to make everyone dazzling. Frowning slightly, Li Jexuan's pale blue eyes looked deep into the distance like the sea, revealing a little mature charm that does not fit his age. Looks pretty good. Tsunade nodded, but was quickly attracted by Li Jexuan's frown. What was he thinking about? Is he thinking about me? No, his expression must be thinking about something big. Yes, a man like him must be thinking about something far-reaching. The meaning of the existence of ninja, or the future relationship of the five powers, or the direction of this war. I have to say that Tsunade has completely fallen in love. Because Li Jexuan didn't even think about the existence of ninjas. He is even less concerned about the future relationship of the five major countries. As for the direction of the war, Li Jexuan didn't care at all as long as the situation was not so bad that it needed a 2-year-old baby to play. Money, where can I get the money? Li Jexuan turned to look at Tsunade, flushed, and shook his head secretly. Forget it, it would be too much to catch a whole all the time. Jia Zanjun is peeking at me. Tsunade's face turned redder. Seeing this, Li Jexuan couldn't help but stretched out his hand and stroked Tsunade's forehead. Tsunade, are you okay? You won't have a fever, right? Tsunade is the only rich second generation that Li Jexuan knows. If Tsunade is also ill, he won't even have the last way out. Well, I'm fine. Tsunade squeezed the corners of his clothes tightly, feeling madly surprised. Kyugen is so gentle, does he really care about me? The misunderstanding is deeper. But this scene happened to be watched by a passing classmate. Look, isn't that Tsunade and Li Jexuan? They are so close. No wonder Li Jexuan can enter the school because it turned out to be soft rice. Li Jexuan is nothing but cursing in his heart. How old are the little kids, so precocious, it's really declining in the world, and people's hearts are not ancient. But Tsunade clenched his fists, his fierce eyes almost cannibalized. If it weren't for these little kids to escape in time, Tsunade might be able to create a murderous pupil technique. Jia Xuanjun, don't mind, I know you don't eat soft rice. Tsunade worriedly grabbed Li Jexuan's hands and comforted, I believe you. Only by learning to maintain a man's fragile self-esteem can he be a good wife. Tsunade clearly remembers what his mother said. Okay, Li Jexuan was stunned for a moment. Is this the crux of the problem? Also, is Tsunade such a gentle character? Although he felt a little strange, Li Jexuan quickly gave himself a perfect explanation. As mentioned in the manga, Tsunade was originally a gentle character, but only after his death did he pretend to be strong. Well, it must be so. Li Jexuan looked at Tsunade with encouragement and nodded secretly. Girl, after you die a man, you will become fierce again. Come on, Tsunade. He feels my love. Yesterday, we talked about the history and foundation of ninjas. Yamada Shiyuki stood on the podium and smiled and nodded. Today we will talk about one of the 3 basics of ninja, the basis of ninjutsu. While talking, Yamada Shiyuki raised his right hand, and a light blue chakra flame ignited fiercely. Compared with yesterday's dull popular science, Yamada believes that today's chakra teaching class will definitely inspire children's love. However, Yamada Shiyuki's hand was almost broken, and there was still no child who raised his hand to ask questions. Instead, they all shrank under the table and whispered. How is this going? Yamada frowned involuntarily, but he didn't directly scold the bear children. His next Yamada is not a waiter, and he is a self-proclaimed teacher. Naturally he will not suppress children in a rough way. He believes that if you want to solve a problem, you must first understand the problem. Thinking of this, Yamada second quietly moved chakra to his ear. Suddenly, the voices of the bear children's discussions poured in. Hey, have you heard? Someone is with Tsunade. Really? That weird girl? Yes, that's Li Jexuan. That commoner. Within 3 seconds, Yamada Shiyuki's face changed. Tsunade was with Li Jexuan. Although he also saw Li Jexuan's amazing tricks yesterday, but in just one day, the progress is too fast, right? At the thought of this, Yamada was stunned. He couldn't help but think of himself in amazement. He is nearly 30 and has no girlfriend yet. And when Li Jexuan was less than 2 years old, he had the highest status and top-notch face among the female dolls in Konoha village. It's so popular. Teacher, since chakra is so important, how should we practice? Li Jexuan was stunned when he saw Yamada Jiji halfway through it, and he was really anxious. The ninja chakra rewards put in the system are almost moldy. He has been waiting for this opportunity to wash the rewards for a long time, and now he can't wait for a second. Semicolon. Yamada was stunned for a second, and then came back to his senses. He really had nothing to do, so he was like a kid. It's just a joke at such a young grade. Suddenly there was a little sour smell in the air. After adjusting his mentality, Yamada Jiyuki continued with a smile. Chakra, normally divided into two parts. One is the biological energy contained in the body, and the other is the spiritual energy accumulated through practice. Li Jexuan nodded secretly, although he had dimly understood these truths when reading comics in his previous life. However, after the systematic training, I really understood more deeply. Under normal circumstances, the chakra contained in our body is not enough for us to use ninjutsu. Speaking of this, the eyes of other children were finally attracted, and Yamada then raised with satisfaction. At this time, we need to train to accumulate mental energy. Until the two energies add up to a certain amount, you have mastered chakra. Hearing this, Li Jexuan's eyes suddenly brightened. Second teacher, does this mean that as long as you have enough energy in your body, the shorter the time you have to master chakra? Yamada nodded with satisfaction. Although Li Jexuan is a bit precocious, it is really unpleasant for the children to learn from each other in class. Yes, if you have more bioenergy, the time you need to practice is shorter. On the contrary, the less bioenergy you have, the longer it will take you to reach the same level as others. This is the so-called qualification. Li Jexuan nodded secretly, grinned, and a few demonic white teeth gleamed. Then teacher, is there anyone who doesn't need to practice, or only needs to practice for a second to master chakra? Upon hearing this, Yamada couldn't help but laugh. Even if the child is precocious, he is still a child after all, so he can ask such innocent things. In history, only the ancestors of ninjas, the legendary 6 Tao immortals, have such aptitude. Yamada Seiyuki laughed and took the opportunity to educate. So, we all must not go too far, we must practice hard step by step and strive for. I really am an educated teacher, and Yamada second gave himself a full score for this wave of answers and unobtrusive guidance education. Yamada is second, you are the best, even if you don't have a girlfriend, this doesn't prevent you from being a good student in education. Yamada Seiyuki shouted and cheered in his heart. But at this moment, oh, I seem to have mastered chakra. Li Jexuan's innocent voice rang abruptly. Impossible. Yamada then turned his head abruptly, only to see the innocent look of Li Jexuan spreading his hands, and the light blue chakra flame burning in his palm. How can this be? I really mastered. Yamada Seiyuki could not attend the lecture anymore, and held Li Jexuan's hands tightly. When he felt the surging chakra in Li Jexuan's body, he couldn't help but look dull. How could there be such a thing? He is 30 years old, Zhang Ren, and has no girlfriend. This child, less than 2 years old, already has a chakra of the lower level of ninja, and his girlfriend is the princess of the Senju family. Looking at it this way, I have really lived on a dog in the past 30 years. Teacher, does this mean that I have the same qualifications as the 6 Tao immortals? Li Jexuan smiled and gave Yamada the second fatal blow. For a while, the whole classroom was talking. Yamada Shiyuki's whole person was stiff, and he turned his head after a while, and opened his mouth with difficulty. This, that. Nod, this is too exaggerated. Is this child the next 6 immortals? This kind of remark was not his turn to be said by a little Zongren. Shake his head, but he himself had confessed himself before. For a while, Yamada was sweating profusely. Where was the laziness of meeting for the first time? But at this moment, Li Jexuan suddenly leaned into Yamada's ear and whispered, Teacher, if you give me 100,000 taels, I will help you cover it. What, 100,000 taels? Yamada Jiyuki's eyes widened. Is this kid blackmailing me? Teacher, don't think too much. Li Jexuan smiled and comforted. Isn't I, a genius with the qualifications of 6 immortals, not worth 100,000 taels of investment? What Li Jexuan said in and out of the way was that he wanted to take Yamada second as his younger brother. Is this really what a 2-year-old child can say? Yamada Shiji couldn't help sweating on his back and felt Li Jexuan's sly eyes, and Yamada Shiji was stunned. Where is this precocious? Is this the old monster rejuvenating? At that moment, Yamada's conjecture was infinitely close to the truth. However, Yamada second finally gave in. He stretched out his hand tremblingly and took out a stack of silver bills from his pocket. This was his monthly salary. Li Jexuan snatched the 100,000 taels from Yamada Shiji's hand with a smile, then turned his head and laughed loudly. Haha, guys, in fact, I have already learned chakra after Uncle Medway. At the critical moment, Li Jexuan still sold Medway. No way, Li Jexuan is not a person who only takes money and does nothing. Besides, although Metroway doesn't know how to ninjutsu at all. But he didn't say it, and Medway didn't say it. Who knew? Knowing that Li Jexuan was helping him out, Yamada Shiji nodded with a dry smile. Haha, Li Jexuan, don't make this kind of joke next time. However, classmate Li Jexuan has mastered chakra at such a young age, and he is also very good. Yamada Jiyuki smiled and walked back to the podium. Just now, we talked about the practice of chakra. Next, let's talk about the basic application methods of chakra. The class seemed to be back to normal again, and most people believed Li Jexuan's explanation. After all, Li Jexuan himself said so, this is just a joke. After all, there really is a 6th immortal as his classmate, which is too unreal. However, a few eyes were dismissive of this rhetoric. What a powerful opponent. Under the long black hair, the deep yellow snake eyes trembled slightly. Thanks to the vision far beyond ordinary people, Orochimaru saw the sinful trade of silver changing hands. Unlike the Orochimaru, Tsunade just subconsciously believes that Li Jexuan is a genius comparable to the 6 immortals. The woman in love really has no sense at all. Am I really not suitable to be a ninja? The distant Hyuga Yizu trembled with fear, even though others would be deceived by Li Jexuan's lies, but Hyuga Yizu, who had only fought with Li Jexuan yesterday, was very clear. At that time yesterday, Li Jexuan didn't have any chakras on him. This guy is a monster. Hyuga Yizu stared at Li Jexuan tightly, lowered his head in fear. He can't beat this monster. No, I can't beat this monster in my life. Hyuga Yasuo buried his head deeply, and tears of grievances couldn't help streaming down. Suddenly, Li Jexuan's mind had a junior treasure chest. New achievement. The heartfelt fear of defeated opponents. Achievement description. The deep fear of the enemy is the most glorious medal of a ninja. Reward. Junior treasure chest. Can this happen? Hyuga Yizu is really a good person, and he gave Li Jexuan 2 treasure chests by himself. Li Jexuan opened the treasure chest beautifully, and as expected, it was another bottle of green energy potion. Totally fear. Li Jexuan squeezed his chin and thought, speaking of which, if the whole class is afraid of me, wouldn't I be able to get hundreds of potions? Trigger task. Become a devil today. Trigger task. A special task that can be triggered when the host reaches certain conditions. Task content. You who have evil thoughts in your heart is restless, let these bear children feel fear with your powerful strength. Task reward. Every time 10 bear children are defeated, a junior treasure chest will be rewarded. Mission time. 7 days. Slowly, Li Jexuan's eyes around him became dangerous. In his eyes, these are no longer his lovely classmates, but bottles of green energy potions. Jingle bell. The get out of class bell just rang, and the whole day of class was over. Go home, my mother made me my favorite sesame today, so I look forward to it. My family is grilling steak today, hee hee. The kids packed their school bags and walked out happily. Not aware of the danger has come quietly. Stop, don't leave, I don't know when. Li Jexuan abruptly stopped by the door and sneered, I drive this mountain, and I plant this tree. If you want to cross this road, you will leave it to buy money. What? Li Jexuan smiled and stretched out his hand. From today, you will give me 100 taels every day. Hearing this, the kids were stunned, or questioned in confusion or anger. What are you talking about? Why should we give you all the pocket money? Because, Li Jexuan grinned, his white teeth gleaming in the sun, you are all too weak. Hearing this, everyone was dumbfounded. How arrogant is this? I, Li Jexuan, are not aiming at anyone, I mean, everyone sitting here counts as one, they are all weak. Ah, what are you talking nonsense, don't stop me from buying barbecue. The first thing that broke out was a fat chubby peer, angrily waving his round arms towards Li Jexuan. Looking at this size, it should be the heir of the Chu Taoist. Li Jexuan smiled and opened his mouth, are you a power player? It's just what I want. Xiao Pengdun rushed towards Li Jexuan like a chariot, and a violent wind sounded between the waves of his round arms. Get away. Ha, you should get out of here. Li Jexuan didn't mean to give in at all, and raised his fist to meet Xiao Pengdun's violent palm. Puff, the intersecting fist sparked a huge wave of air. After the dust settled, Xiao Pengdun flew out at a faster speed than before, and a mouthful of blood drew a beautiful parabola in the sky. Boom, Xiao Pengdun hit the floor like a ball. Nothing happened. The Chu Daoist has always been known for its strength, but this Li Jexuan actually flew him out with a punch. Never confront Li Jexuan. At this moment, this thought involuntarily occurred in everyone's hearts. However, Li Jexuan didn't care about other thoughts at all, walked to Xiao Pengdun's side with a smile, and skillfully took out the pocket of Xiao Pengdun's meatballs. All except these 300 taels. Li Jexuan smiled and turned the bulging meatballs into shriveled skin. This guy is really a demon. However, there are still people with innocent brain circuits who have expressed different views on this matter. Okay, 100 taels, why did you take him 300 taels? No. Li Jexuan squinted his eyes, smiled and shook his fingers. The 100 tael I mentioned earlier is the tuition you will pay as usual in the future, because you will consume my strength this time, so. Li Jexuan smiled and stuffed the fleshy skin back into Xiao Pengdun's pocket. This time, it's all. Demon, HMPH, don't think that you can do whatever you want after defeating Hyuga Yizu and Chu Dahaoji. Under the dark green windbreaker, under the dark sunglasses is a small face that cannot be seen clearly. Yuzhi Junpeak walked out of the corner with a sneer, swaying the windbreaker with a terrible fart. You know, the half-tone of me and them is not at the same level. Okay, why is such a badass who plays bugs? Don't think about it, this kind of dress is the air of the oily girl. Li Jexuan curled his lips in disdain, and the more taciturn the oil girl family was, the stronger. The guy who didn't understand the truth was nothing but cannon fodder. HMPH, you will regret it. Yuzhi Junpeak took 2 steps back abruptly, shook off his cloak and shouted, secret technique, the wasp of the bad worm. Buzzing. With the intensive vibration of the insect's wings, Li Jexuan couldn't help being cautious. Unexpectedly, such a stinky guy also mastered chakra, and even learned the secret technique of sending bad bugs from the oily girl. Li Jexuan was very impressed with the secret technique of sending bad insects by the oil girl clan. The oily woman shining open the windbreaker is a dense army of insects, not to mention fighting. Just looking at it makes the scalp numb. Out. The wasp with the big thumb vibrated its wings desperately, waving the tail needle on his fiercely. The emerald green tail needle was very poisonous. Sure enough, it was the secret art of destroying insects of the oil girl clan. If this wasp was given to ordinary people, it would be immortal and disabled. If there are hundreds of such guys, Li Jexuan can only flee. However, Li Jexuan waited left and right, and only 8 wasps flew out slowly from the windbreaker. 8. When did Li Jexuan raise his eyebrows? When did the oily girl become so lonely that he couldn't even raise bugs? Seeing Li Jexuan's gaze gradually contemptuous, Yuzhi Junfeng quickly defended. What a joke, how could I only have 8 wasps? As he said, Yuzhi Junfeng put his head into his windbreaker, and pleaded like coaxing the child to get up. Xiaoju, come out, after I go back, I will give you a meal. After all, are there only 9? Li Jexuan grinned involuntarily. Is this guy sure to be funny? Don't be long-winded, 9 are enough to balance you. After the 9th wasp flew out slowly, Yuzhi Junpeak was full of confidence in speaking, and she was full of worms. Go, teach him a lesson. After releasing the worms, Yuzhi Junpeak waved his hand with a fowl, bite him into a pig's head. Buzzing. The 9 huge wasps circled towards Li Jexuan from multiple directions, and the green venom on the tail needle looked very dangerous. So that's it. Li Jexuan nodded lightly, compared to Yuzhi, which is the kind of quantitative bug. Yuzhi Junpeak chose elite tactics. These wasps are not only fast, small in size, but also very powerful because of the poisonous needle. When most people encounter this situation, even if they have the ability to easily solve 1 wasp, they will be hit hard by the other 8 wasps. However, for Li Jexuan, it's really a good tool for practicing. Li Jexuan closed his eyes slightly, shaking his wrist lightly, and the matte color of time and space made an instant shot. Om, sharp time kuwu is like a black lightning, slamming the wasp in front of Li Jexuan. After being hit by this knife, even the elite wasp of Lu Bu in the insect could only fall to the ground weakly, seeing that he could no longer survive. Little 4. Ujurchin Peak roared and waved his arms, commanding the remaining 8 wasps, "You fellow, I must make you pay." Perhaps the other 8 wasps have become faster when they notice the fall of their companions. Ha ha ha, there is no more suffering. You guy is dead. UJV Gen Peak laughed excitedly. As long as he wins this battle, it shows that his theory is feasible. Their family does not have to raise bugs as cannon fodder. Insects can also be very powerful. However, time and space traveled through time and space without any abruptness, and once again returned to Li Jexuan's hands. Li Jexuan didn't even let go of his hand. Just throw kunai, and then kunai. That abominable hand seems to have countless kunai available. How can this be? Ujurjun Peak's eyes widened blankly. The buzzing wasps were like falling leaves in autumn, one after another falling to the ground. Little 5, little 8, little 9. Boss, you died so miserably. Ujurjun Peak sat slumped on the ground, weeping and sobbing. Cry shit, these little guys are still alive. Li Jexuan curled his mouth in disdain, and picked up the wasp named Boss. Look carefully, I just cut off their wings. Ujurchin Peak opened his hands blankly, and the wasp named Boss was crawling around vigorously, but one of its wings was broken. Li Jexuan actually just cut the wings of these wasps. So strong. The Snake King couldn't help but narrowed his eyes. Li Jexuan's strength still exceeded his expectations. Just this hand kunai throwing made people who wanted to pull him at a distance to give up this idea. What a tricky opponent. Thank you. Seeing that his wasp was okay, Ujurjun Peak couldn't help but laugh. The dark cyan hood could not help but slip down, revealing a pale pink face. Ujurchin Peak turned out to be a girl, with a cute face and crying pear flower with rain, both cute and pitiful. In fact, holding the wasps with broken wings, Ujurjun Feng nodded shyly to Li Jexuan, "You can call me Fengji." Seeing this, Tsunade on the side couldn't help but feel anxious. This Ujurchin Peak, why do you let Junzan call you Fengji? Junjiazan has never called me so close. At this time, Yamada, who was hiding in the dark, opened his mouth wide, and didn't dare to say, "This is also okay. Is picking up girls such a simple thing? Okay, Mineko." Li Jexuan smiled softly and stretched out his hand towards Yunu Zifeng, who was sitting on the ground. This scene is really beautiful. The handsome angel gentleman stretches out his hand to the confused girl who fell into the dust. The story of the knight and the princess in trouble is always so beautiful. Tsunade's heart couldn't help but grabbed. Does Yugen-kun really think Yuanu Shifeng is cute? Others also whispered. Although this Li Jexuan is a bit arrogant, at least he still knows how to pity and cherish Jade. Bring your wallet. Everyone was stunned. They haven't finished their words yet. What is this unfolding? What? Jun Peak raised his head and looked at Li Jexuan blankly. The half-stretched hand froze. What did you just say? I said, hand over your wallet. Of course, Li Jexuan stretched out his hand again. Let's say yes, we beat you, and your wallet belongs to me. Amount. Jun Peak was stunned and his brain was blank. What happened? What's the situation now? What about the Princess Knight? Hey, I said you didn't intend to go wrong. Li Jexuan's smile suddenly became cold, and he took out time and space Kuwu again, and coldly threatened, don't force me to kill all your wasps. UJV Gen Peak subconsciously hugged his wasp tightly, and then cried out aggrieved loudly in the next second. She grew up so old and had never suffered such a grievance. She was really ashamed of herself. Here you are, you badass. UJV Gen Peak angrily dropped a wasp purse and rushed out of the school crying. Tisk tisk, it's a little girl after all, so I can't bear such a blow. Li Jexuan curled his mouth in disdain, and took out the wasp, clean. Bird, beast, Yamada Shiyuki, hiding in the dark, gritted his teeth with many classmates. Only Tsunade blushed. 1,000 taels, is it really a poor child, a rich daughter? Li Jexuan casually threw the uniquely shaped wasp purse to Tsunade. Tsunade, wait for your help tomorrow to return this purse to her. Tsunade, who took the purse, was stunned for a moment, and then nodded happily, okay, I see. This seems to be affirmation of Xingmia, making Tsunade happy to pass out. If you don't care about her feelings, why did Junji Azan ask her to return this purse? After all, the stories produced by Returning Things are broadcast every day on TV. God knows that Tsunade would think so much. The straight steel man Lee Jexuan is just a simple feeling. Girls and girls should be familiar with each other. The atmosphere suddenly calmed down strangely, and everyone was stunned by Lee Jexuan's cruel operation. This is not enough. The tasks have just been completed, 2/10. A treasure chest hasn't been earned yet. Thinking of this, Lee Jexuan suddenly laughed arrogantly. Could it be that none of you dare to stand up? Lee Jexuan looked at his classmates playfully, and arrogantly curled his lips. Aren't you all ninjas, but mice that only hide in the gutter? After hearing this, someone finally couldn't stand it. Student Lee Jexuan, although I understand that your family is poor and you need money. The handsome blue-haired young man walked out with a steady pace, exuding a noble temperament all over his body, frowning slightly and yelling, "But, what you did is too much." Broken. This person is Kato Den. Lee Jexuan recognized him at the first sight of this boy. This is Tsunade's boyfriend, Katoden, who is known as the Prince of Naruto. Well, this guy has a noble temperament is rumored. Lee Jexuan glanced at Tsunade involuntarily, and Tsunade's face turned red involuntarily. No wonder Tsunade Heim is a man whom Tsunade can never forget, but Tsunade is so shy when he shows up. Lee Jexuan thought secretly, but after this break, Tsunade will probably be able to stand up again. However, what Lee Jexuan never expected was that he had guessed completely wrong. Jia Xuanjin is looking at me, will he secretly look at me at this time? Tsunade's red hot, looking at the guy named Kato Tan, couldn't help feeling disgusted. This guy is so annoying, the blue long-haired girl is silly. It's just to stand up now to please that Yoonjun Peak. He even ridiculed Jun Jia Zan's poor family, really a disgusting guy. Lee Jexuan couldn't think that he had changed history inadvertently. I will beat you to make you understand that bullying a weak classmate is not a skill. Kato Jie's angry roar, raised his fist and rushed towards Lee Jexuan. Anyway, this guy really has enough stinky farts. Lee Jexuan curled his lips, squinting his eyes calmly to challenge. Although Kato Dan died very early, but this does not mean that he is not strong enough. Even on the contrary, the art of spiritual transformation is definitely one of the most terrifying ninjutsu among Naruto. The soul is separated, and the murder is invisible. This is a bit like the magical power of the nascent soul in the Earth fantasy novel. Kato Dan is definitely not a person waiting for leisure. This punch, I must do my best, otherwise, I may not be able to win. Lee Jexuan turned his whole body's strength and stared at Kato Duan tightly. At this moment, Lee Jexuan's spirit and energy were all concentrated. What? Lee Jexuan almost punched Kato at the same time. With a bang, the two fists intersected, and Kato Duan flew out simply and neatly, and fell next to Xiao Pengdun of the Chu Daoist school. He tilted his head and passed out. Ah, why is it so weak? Lee Jexuan was stunned, and Kato Duan seemed not as strong as he thought. Soon, Lee Jexuan discovered that he seemed to have made a logical error. Although the art of spiritualization is strong, Kato Dian can't do it now. The current Kato Den, at best, is about the same level as Hyuga Yazuki. Lee Jexuan shrugged, looked at Tsunade, and apologized in his heart. I'm sorry, he started a little harder. Beautiful shot. Tsunade jumped up with excitement. Give me this disgusting guy so much. After connecting the three battles, Lee Jexuan all defeated with a crushing attitude. Seeing this, someone finally gave in. I pay. A thin guy with glasses came out first, and timidly took out 100 taels from the ordinary brick-like purse. Here you, let me pass this time. Lee Jexuan smiled and took the money, and then shook his head decisively. No. Okay, then I will go home. Before the eyes of the young man took 2 steps, he suddenly turned his head stiffly, crying and said, Why is this? I have already given you the money. The so-called skin pain. Lee Jexuan grinned and opened his mouth. If you don't beat you, how can I guarantee that you will pay on time in the future? No, I will pay the money on time. The boy with eyes was almost crying, and quickly explained, if I don't eat, I will pay on time. Receive Kurosawa's heartfelt fear, reward a junior treasure chest. Good people, unlike these stingy guys, they played 3 games and didn't even fish a treasure chest. However, the count of triggered tasks jumped to 3/10. Do you want to let go of this young boy? But counting that, as long as you defeat 7 more people, you can get the treasure chest. In the end, Li Jexuan decided to treat him equally. As the saying goes, sending the Buddha to the west, Kurosawa-no, please give me this point. Don't worry, I will act lightly. Li Jexuan smiled and pushed Kurosawa-no to the ground with a light punch. When the 3 throbbed to 4, Li Jexuan's smile couldn't help but become even brighter. Kurosawa, really a good customer. Li Jexuan smiled and waved to Kurosawa's back, welcome to come again. Hearing this, Kurosawa was frightened and almost failed to fall. He was really terrified of Li Jexuan. You devil, don't deceive people too much. That is, you are not worthy of entering the ninja school at all. You are a sad civilian. Facing Li Jexuan's domineering, angry shouts came from the crowd. Li Jexuan pulled out his ears and curled his lips in disdain. I'm a ninja, not interested in a coward who just hides behind others and shakes his lips. Suddenly, Li Jexuan's eyes became cold. If you really have the strength, then come and defeat me. Upon hearing this, the crowd was quiet for a long time. But suddenly, a sharp voice came out. Everyone, this guy is a demon. We don't have to tell him about the rules of a duel at all. Let's go together and defeat him. Hearing this, many people became restless. This is correct. Although Li Jexuan cannot be beaten in a duel alone, what if they go together? Soon, more than 60 people rushed out of the crowd. Seeing this, Dashimaru shook his head disdainfully. No matter how the battle is going, these people have already lost. Come on, a bunch of ridiculous clowns. Li Jexuan curled his lips in disdain, but instead rushed towards the 60 people. Kill him. Let's go together. In an instant, tide-like attacks came from all directions. Li Jexuan is like a flatboat sinking into the vast ocean, with the possibility of capsizing at any time. Jia Xuanjin, I'll help you. Tsunade wanted to help subconsciously. No, Tsunade, I will never let a woman hurt for me. I will never let my woman hurt for me. Tsunade's eyes moistened involuntarily, and only a real man like Yugen-kun could say such a thing. As for where this mind came from, it doesn't matter. Tsunade knew that Li Jexuan must have thought of it in his heart, but he was anxious. These are all energy potions. Li Jexuan slammed a punch, knocked down one, and thought secretly, if Tsunade helps, wouldn't I be a big loss? But with only 5, Li Jexuan felt that he was going to be overwhelmed. Mr. Jia-zan is about to be unable to stand it. Tsunade grabbed the corner of his clothes anxiously. Second Yamada hesitated, whether he wanted to go out and rescue Li Jexuan. After all, this is a young man who has the same qualifications as the 6 Dao Immortals. Only Dashimaru squinted coldly. Is that the end here? Don't let me down, Li Jexuan. Hi, it hurts these little boys to hit people. Another sap that didn't know where it came from hit Li Jexuan's head, and Li Jexuan could not stand still. We are going to defeat him, come on. Look, we just lost 5 brothers and we defeated him. The sentiment was violent, and the offensive became more fierce. However, at this moment, Li Jexuan took out the only bottle of energy potion left in his pocket. Thank you, Hyuga. Li Jexuan muttered silently and poured the medicine down at the last second when his consciousness was about to disappear. We won. This Li Jexuan is no big deal. Li Jexuan fell towards the ground under the gaze of everyone's expectation, but just the next second he was about to fall. Li Jexuan, who seemed to be shaky, suddenly bounced straight up like a spring. Hello, everyone, Li Jexuan greeted as if there was nothing wrong, and knocked the nearest guy down with a punch. What's going on? Why can he stand up? After hitting 10 more people, Li Jexuan fell again. Brothers, although it was difficult, we won in the end. Before he finished speaking, Li Jexuan stood up again with a rub. Hello everyone, I'm back again. Opening a treasure chest, a green energy potion made Li Jexuan come back in full state again. Monster, no way, we can't beat this monster. Ding, received Saburo Funamoto's heartfelt fear and rewarded a junior treasure chest. After that, the ding sound almost became one piece. The more you fight back, the more desperate these guys get. Because they found that no matter how they fight, Li Jexuan will stand up unharmed in the end. This is a monster that can't be killed. Finally, they all collapsed. Li Jexuan was covered in blood. Just like a knight with one enemy and 100 in an ancient oil painting standing on the battlefield with corpses all over the field, lonely and powerful. Mr. Jia-zan. Tsunade was already speechless, and Li Jexuan's figure had completely occupied her heart. Beauty loves heroes, and a powerful man like Li Jexuan naturally makes people unable to take their eyes off. This amazing resilience, even the first-generation adults can't match it. Yamada Shiji, who was hiding in the dark, was secretly speechless, thinking seriously about whether he should really be Li Jexuan's younger brother. It seemed very promising. Da Shiwan also clenched his fists and smiled. Li Jexuan, you really deserve to be my opponent. As for Li Jexuan himself, come on, line up. Li Jexuan smiled and took 100 taels from the cute ponytail, and comforted him. Don't worry, I will do it very lightly. After Li Jexuan settled 60 people in one go, the rest of the people were quite sensible. Obediently hand in 100 taels, punch gently, and go home to eat, happy. Come on, this is 1,000 taels. The handsome little fat man smiled and took out 1,000 taels from Toad's purse. Okay, Li Jexuan took the 1,000 tael, and raised his eyes with a playful smile. Young man, quite rich. My name is Hengshi Yuxian, brother Jia-zan joked. Hengshi Yuxian smiled fearfully. It's okay. My dad is in a real estate business. I am willing to pay twice in the future, I just hope you can start. Although Hengshi Yuxian is humble, he still can't help revealing a kind of rich man's pride. Well, this is good, I have no opinion. Li Jexuan smiled and patted Hengshi Yuxian on the shoulder. There are fewer and fewer conscious young men like you. Should. Hengshi Yuxian nodded quickly, with a humble smile on his face. Don't worry, I will act lightly. Li Jexuan smiled and nodded, and then slammed a punch, pulling Hengshi 3 meters away like a money top. Hengshi Yuxian was like a ball, and he fainted with a whine after playing several times. TMD, what I look down on most is your group of real estate agents. Drive up housing prices, making ordinary people nowhere to live. Li Jexuan sneered and retracted his fist. In this world, the strong is the king, and it's not easy to have money in front of me. Seeing this, the people behind didn't even dare to get close, and they all honestly paid the money and got beaten. Call. Li Jexuan let out a long sigh, smoking more than 100 people in a row. Even Li Jexuan felt a little sore in his shoulder. However, at this moment, a pair of gentle hands suddenly pressed on Li Jexuan's shoulder. Tsunade. Turning his head, Tsunade was leaning gently behind him. Tsunade's face blushed at a sudden, but he still didn't let go. He just gently massaged Li Jexuan's shoulder, and said, I think Jia-zan is very tired, I want you to relax. Hearing this, Li Jexuan didn't think much, just turned his head and smiled brilliantly. Thanks. Jun Jia-zan, so gentle. Tsunade smiled happily. If these words were heard by those who had been beaten just now, they would definitely scold them without hesitation. Tender, is this guy a demon? While enjoying Tsunade's service at ease, Li Jexuan calculated how much he made this time. Okay, trigger task. Become a demon today. Task reward. Every 10 opponents defeated, a junior treasure chest will be rewarded. 40 treasure chests, 9/10. In addition, the income of more than 30,000 taels is also very impressive, which is really a big profit. Go, Tsunade, let's go home. Li Jexuan smiled and turned and left. In his opinion, this upright robbery could come to a successful conclusion. But at this moment, a thin figure suddenly came out from the corner. Jia-zan Jun, you really did not disappoint me. Slender black hair, pale face, and those red-yellow snake eyes. Orochimaru. Li Jexuan frowned involuntarily and said bluntly, you can leave directly, I have no intention of being an enemy of you. Fighting against opponents of Orochimaru level, no matter how you win or lose, you will lose money. If you use up a bottle of energy potion, you have to knock down a whole 10 big snake pills to earn it back. This is really unprofitable. However, the reason why Uncle Snake is precisely because of his unusualness. What Uncle Snake wants is not easy to refuse. No, Li Jexuan, you can't escape this battle. It seems that if he doesn't fight today, he won't let it go. Li Jexuan helplessly took out a bottle of energy potion, raised his head and poured it down. In the face of opponents like Dashawan, if he did not go all out, Li Jexuan suspected that he might not have the opportunity to drink the energy potion. Although Da Shiwan couldn't see the energy potion, he could feel that Li Jexuan's state had returned to its peak. What a powerful ability! Orochimaru squinted the eyes of the snake, and slowly touched her waist pocket with her hands. Li Jexuan's right hand also trembled slightly, and time and space fell silently from his sleeve into his hand. Almost at the same time, two black lights cut through the sky at the same time, violently colliding together. Ping! The exquisite shuriken fell to the ground, but Orochimaru reached out his hand, but another shuriken shot at Li Jexuan. At the same time, Da Shiwan exerted force under his feet, and the whole person chased the sword in his hand and forced it towards Li Jexuan. Whether it is the speed or power of the shuriken, the pressure that Da Shiwan puts on Li Jexuan is completely different from other miscellaneous fish. Come back! Time and space Kuwu returned to Li Jexuan's hands, but the speed of the Orochimaru shuriken was too fast. Li Jexuan had no time to shoot a second Kuwu, so he could barely use Kuwu's parry to block the shuriken of Orochimaru. However, at almost the same time, Da Shiwan was already in front of Li Jexuan. Si Wei Shen Hai Wu Yin. Da Shiwan's immature hands quickly formed seals, and his mouth opened wide, hot flames gushing from Da Shiwan's throat. Art Fire Escape Fireball. An orange-red flame rushed towards his face, and Li Jexuan's eyes widened involuntarily. Even though he has tried his best to dodge, he is still affected by the flames of the fireball. Shit! There was a faint smell of barbecue in the air, and Li Jexuan's entire arm was burned. Worthy of being Orochimaru, although the degree of completion is not very high, he can use such exaggerated ninjutsu only at the age of 2. In this era, he is indeed a well-deserved genius. However, after releasing this C-class ninja, Da Shiwan couldn't help but gasp slightly. Li Jexuan opened another treasure chest quickly, took out an energy potion and poured it down. Seeing this, Da Shiwan frowned slightly. But he didn't say anything, the battle has just begun. Next, Li Jexuan was almost always beaten by Da Shiwan. Whether it is strength or speed, Da Shiwan is better than Li Jexuan. Coupled with the D-level ninjutsu that shot from time to time, Li Jexuan opened 10 treasure chests one after another before reluctantly persisting. Hoo. At this point, even Da Shiwan was exhausted. Sure enough, Da Shiwan is still too strong. Li Jexuan shook his head helplessly. He had used 10 bottles of energy potions for a while. If he continues like this, he will only lose more. Do you want to admit defeat? For a moment, Li Jexuan was a little tangled. But at this moment, Da Shiwan suddenly shook his head and sighed, I lost. What? Li Jexuan's eyes widened suspiciously. He was crushed and beaten all this time, but Da Shiwan had surrendered at this time. I have no chakra and strength. Da Shiwan shook his head slightly depressed. After playing for so long, I haven't seen what kind of secret technique you used to restore your strength. It's really unwilling. Before the words fell, Orochimaru fell straight down. He is exhausted. Seeing this, Li Jexuan couldn't help but stunned, and shook his head slightly. Let's go home. Li Jexuan naturally grabbed Tsunade's small hand. In his opinion, such a big child is no different from holding his own sister. Jia Xuanjin. 2 red clouds flew out of Tsunade's cute little face. Yugen-kun is so direct, really bold. 2 people go home together. Is it just like mom and dad? However, at this moment, don't go, return my barbecue. A fat little hand grabbed Li Jexuan's trousers. I want to eat kebabs, I saved for 3 days, It turned out that Xiao Pengdun of the Chu Daoist family woke up. Xiao Pengdun sucked on Li Jexuan's legs like a fat leech, crying with tears and nose. For the Akita family, battle and face are not important, only food cannot be disappointed. I want to go home with Jun Jia-zan, you fat pig, let go. Tsunade would even have a murderous heart. But at this moment, cuckoo, Tsunade's stomach groaned suddenly. After all, she is the princess of the Thousand Hands clan, and her diet is very regular. Simply put, this girl is a hungry physique. It just so happens that I am also hungry, so I will invite you to eat barbecue. Li Jexuan clutched his stomach and smiled to cover Tsunade. Tsunade, shall we go together? Jun Jia-zan is really gentle. Facing Li Jexuan's invitation, Tsunade wanted to nod subconsciously. But at this moment, a person who shouldn't have appeared suddenly appeared. Tsunade, why haven't you come home yet? The second generation of Hokage, Shinshojian walked out slowly. His face was full of sorrow, and it took a long time to sigh helplessly and shook his head. Tsunade, I think I have to tell you something. Shinshojian hasn't even returned to the battlefield. Li Jexuan frowned. What happened? However, this is no longer the range he can intervene now. After bidding farewell to Tsunade hastily, Li Jexuan still invited Xiao Pengdun to eat barbecue as agreed. Puff puff puff. The plump barbecue was beating gently on the wire net, and Xiao Pengdun's eyes hadn't been moved since entering the barbecue shop. It wasn't until he put the first piece of barbecue into his mouth that he groaned happily. My name is Chu Daopengji, thank you for inviting me to eat barbecue. Okay, Autumn Daopengji, Autumn Dao Fatty. Li Jexuan nodded absently. Sure enough, he still cared very much about what Sensho Janma had just said and the sad expression that was unspeakable. Including his appearance in the village is very weird. According to memory, it should be the first time when the Ninja World War was fierce. What happened made the Naruto Senshojian return to the village regardless of the battlefield. Hongji, do you know what is going on in this war? Li Jexuan frowned and asked out almost subconsciously. Li Jexuan laughed as soon as he finished speaking. I'm really crazy. Fatty Chu Dao is just a 3-year-old kid, how could he know such a thing? I know. Fatty Chu Dao nodded naturally, and took a piece of barbecue and stuffed it into his mouth. You know, Li Jexuan's eyes widened in surprise, grabbed Chu Dao's clothes, and hurriedly asked, what is the purpose of this battle? Scramble for the tail beast. Fatty Chu Dao nodded naturally. We in Konoha village have 9 tail beasts, so the surrounding 4 big nations joined forces to them. Snatch the tail beast. Li Jexuan was confused all over. In his memory, the orthodox statement in the previous life stated that the 9-tailed beast was distributed to other countries on the initiative of the first generation of Chichibukai. But when he said that, Li Jexuan suddenly felt suspicious about his rhetoric. You know, the status of the tail beast in the ninja world is no less than the nuclear bomb of the earth. The first generation of Konoha village and Uchiha Madara, as the 2 strongest people in the world, what reason do they have to distribute the tail beast to other countries? Another point is that there is no accurate statement about the time and cause of the death of the first generation in the previous life. In other words, in the world of Naruto, the history of the grandfathers of the 12 Little Strong is all vague. Which one is the truth? 30,000 tails. Li Jexuan looked at the bill, sad tears involuntarily flowed down. Fatty Chu Dao is really good at eating. He only took a while and ate 30,000 yuan. The whole day's protection fee was collected in vain. However, it is not without gain. Boss Ji is on, I will follow you in the future. Seeing that Li Jexuan's face was not good, Chu Dao quickly patted his chest and promised, I must tell the boss as soon as I hear any news from home in the future. The sky was completely dark, and the sky was full of dark clouds, and there was a heavy rain coming. After Fatty Chu Dao left, Li Jexuan couldn't help but think about this dark rainy night. As the saying goes, the night is black and the wind is high and the night is killing people. Maybe today is an opportunity. Phased task. Kill Tsuruda. Task reward. Kunai throw intermediate. Mission time limit. 1 week. It looks like it's time to visit an old friend tonight. At the back door of the Silent Baby Care Center, the huge trash can opened its hideous mouth in the dark, as if waiting for something. Suddenly, the sharp quarrel broke the silence. What is your mother-in-law arguing about? I'm just going to have a flower wine. The man snarled angrily, without any guilt. Tsuruda was lying on the bed, covering his ears impatiently. But the quarrel between men and women still passed into his ears. Suddenly, the woman was completely crazy, screaming, picked up something, and threw it out the window. Wow, the sound of broken glass was particularly harsh. The man yelled in horror, you woman is crazy. There are still a million tails in there. Hearing this, Tsuruda, who was originally very irritable, jumped out of the bed almost reflexively. Money. Tsuruda is not a ninja, so he prefers money. Because only money can narrow the gap between him and the ninja. 1 million tails. Hetien could no longer curse and rushed out the back door. The men and women on the building are still arguing. In the dark rainy night, a huge black suitcase is lying quietly in the shadow of the street. Originally, Tsuruda was still a little confused, but when he saw the cute paper money floating on the ground outside the suitcase, he has nothing to doubt anymore. 1, 2. Tsuruda picked up all the scattered banknotes, and excitedly came to the suitcase with the opening slightly opened. Little baby, here I am. Tsuruda suddenly opened the suitcase, but there was no banknote in it. Waiting for him, there is only one sharp kunai. Flutter. Tsuruda fell to the ground feebly, and bright red blood poured out from his neck, mixed with rainwater and poured into the dirty sewer. 10 minutes later, several ninjas wearing animal masks slowly stared at Tsuruda's corpse. At this time, in the dilapidated ancestral house of Metroway, Li Jexuan was soaking in the medicinal bath comfortably. You smell of blood. Medway frowned and threw Li Jexuan's clothes into the washing tub. Nothing, just had a fight with classmates today. Li Jexuan smiled and waved his hands, but don't worry, I will settle down. In other words, this heavy rain will erase everything for me. Li Jexuan smiled and closed his eyes and opened the system. Kill Hachan mission completed. Do you receive a reward? Receive. It was still the familiar heat flow. Li Jexuan could feel that his strength became stronger. Character. Li Jexuan. Xian. 6. Fine. 0. Print. 0. Body. 0.8. Forbearance. 0. Magic. 0. Speed. 0.8. Force. 5. The power of 5 people. In addition, Li Jexuan still has 31 primary treasure chests that have not been opened. System, 10 in a row. Not surprisingly, Li Jexuan had 10 more green energy potions. Open again. 10 more potions of energy. Open again. The green glow made Li Jexuan a little dazed. Is there only energy potion in this elementary treasure chest? Li Jexuan muttered greedily. It's not that energy potion is not good, but if there is only energy potion, it is better to call the energy potion box directly. While thinking about it, Li Jexuan smoothly opened the last treasure chest. In fact, Li Jexuan no longer holds any hope. However, a faint fluorescence flashed, and a distinctive scroll appeared. Rachel Scroll. Using this scroll will proficiently master S-rank ninjutsu Rach. Simple description, but shocking content. It's just a low-level treasure box, and it can actually play S-level ninjutsu. Learn. Li Jexuan took out the scroll and chose to study without hesitation. In the next second, Li Jexuan's spirit suddenly jumped into a thunderstorm. Boom, lightning and thunder, as if the world was about to be torn in half by this thunderous thunder. However, in the continuous heavy rain, Li Jexuan discovered that there was a small figure standing in the wind and rain. Kakashi. The dazzling silver-white hair was like lightning in the night. This turned out to be Kakashi in his youth. What is he doing here? Li Jexuan's eyes widened involuntarily, as if he was watching a movie that was infinitely close to reality. He can even clearly feel the dampness of the rain and the violent thunder. Kakashi's silver-white hair shook gently in the wind blowing. Zitsa. The light blue thunder was beating, Kakashi's hands were lowered, and a group of dazzling blue thunder suddenly burned in his palms. In the next second, Kakashi turned into thunder, like an electric light squad rushing straight toward the sky. The dazzling blue thunder skyrocketed like a thunder in the sky. At this moment, a huge pure white lightning fell fiercely in the sky. Li Jexuan held his breath nervously, and time seemed to become sluggish. But after all, the pure white lightning and the violent blue thunder collided fiercely in this dark rainy night. Boom! The huge violent sound made the whole world quiet. The sky shuddered, and the huge pure white lightning suddenly separated from the middle, turning into 2 small white thunder and lightning. It's cut. It actually cut the lightning. Li Jexuan trembled involuntarily. Kakashi, cut the lightning. At this time, the blue thunder that had cut through the lightning continued to move forward without stopping, and then slowly stopped until it penetrated hundreds of giant trees. This is Rachel. When Li Jexuan understood this, everything in front of him began to slowly dissipate, until the silver-white messy hair disappeared in his sight, and Li Jexuan slowly recovered. This scroll actually allowed him to experience the birth of Rech. Ugly Mao Shen. Subconsciously Jayan, a small light blue thunder began to appear in Li Jexuan's palm. Zitsa. Even in the clay pot, Li Jexuan subconsciously pushed his palm up. Lei Che. A whole set of actions are flowing and flowing, as if born. The light blue thunder slowly converged in Li Jexuan's palm to form a dark blue blade, but when the blade was half formed, I suddenly felt an uncontrollable tiredness and emptiness. Chakra. Exhausted. The shortage of chakra made the dark blue blade shake steadily. However, Li Jexuan can only look stupidly at this half-completed lakey blade. Finally, the half-handled thunder blade burst open, turning into hundreds of sharp, small electric currents, making ear-piercing screams. Hundreds of currents, like a blooming silver bouquet, penetrate everything. Li Jexuan couldn't help but opened his mouth wide. Chidori. There has always been a saying that Chidori is weakened by Rachel. Because Sasuke's research on Rach is not deep enough, Rach's voice is small and Chidori's voice is loud, which means that Chidori's energy is not concentrated, and chakra is not enough to condense and compress. But Li Jexuan here is the opposite. Because of the existence of the system, Li Jexuan's understanding of Reiki is no less than that of Kakashi himself. However, the rare chakra dragged Rach's completion, resulting in Rach, who was only half completed, mutated into an uncontrollable Chidori. Li Jexuan didn't blow up, he was lucky enough. Li Jexuan couldn't help but feel startled in a cold sweat. Now he can understand why the junior treasure chest can produce S-level ninjutsu. This scroll is different from the shuriken throwing rewarded by the system. The scroll is only responsible for teaching you how to learn ninjutsu, regardless of whether you have the chakra and ability to release ninjutsu. It's really cheating. Li Jexuan couldn't help but spit out secretly, but fortunately, Lei Che could at least be released as 1,000 birds. In the quiet park, the crystal clear dew slowly slipped from the green branches. Tick. The light blue arc beats gently in the palms, just barely forming the shape of a blade. Chidori. Li Jexuan tried to push these unstable arc blades away. Zitsa. But before Li Jexuan's palm moved 1 centimeter, these arcs suddenly exploded, turning into dozens of sharp electric currents to splash around, piercing through trees and destroying the earth. Failed again. When Sasuke first learned Rachel, he was not proficient enough. However, it has also been able to fully utilize the characteristics of Lakey's piercing penetration, piercing the huge water tank with one blow. But as the saying goes, it is easy to change from frugality to luxury, and it is difficult to change from luxury to frugality. After Li Jexuan fully understood Rachel's secrets, it was very difficult to create a Chidori 1 level lower. The only one taught by Rachel scrolls is Rachel. If you want to create 1,000 birds, you can only rely on Li Jexuan's own comprehension. However, Li Jexuan could feel that he was very close to success. The sun gradually rises. Chidori is a powerful A-level ninjutsu after all. Don't rush for a while, it's time to go to class. Boss, there seems to be a problem in the battlefield ahead. As soon as he returned to the classroom, Fatty Chu Dao approached Li Jexuan's ear and said mysteriously, I heard that 2 important figures died on the battlefield. Okay. Li Jexuan nodded absently, and could not help turning his head to look around, but after searching for a long time, he couldn't find the familiar figure. Tsunade doesn't seem to come to school today. Realizing that Li Jexuan was a little absent-minded, Fatty Chu Dao lowered his voice and continued, also I heard that these 2 important figures seem to be related to Tsunade Heim. What? Li Jexuan turned his head fiercely, grabbed Fat Chu Dao, and asked fiercely, you mean, these 2 people are related to Tsunade Heim? Who are they? Fatty Chu Dao was startled by Li Jexuan, and shook his head repeatedly. I don't know, I only learned about it after listening to the adults at home chat. Hearing this, Li Jexuan muttered and lowered his head slowly. In fact, even if Fat Chu Dao didn't say it, Li Jexuan could vaguely guess it. He discovered this in his previous life. Like Medway, Tsunade was supposed to be Tsunade's closest parents, and the only child of Senjutsu, but there was no voice in the original work. It seems that Tsunade's parents should have died in the first ninja war, just like Medway. In this way, it makes sense. The sad but unspeakable expression in Shinshojian yesterday. It is indeed a difficult thing to tell my granddaughter the news of my parents' death. This is war, anyone can die. In fact, Li Jexuan knew this very well, but because Konoha's strength was strong enough, the village looked as peaceful as before, and most people ignored this. But for the first time, even if Li Jexuan was separated by thousands of miles, he still smelled the blood on the battlefield. Thinking of this, Li Jexuan couldn't help but worry Tsunade. That strong and cute little girl should be able to survive, right? While Li Jexuan was thinking, Tsunade opened the door and walked in. Tsunade. But unlike the energetic Tsunade in the past, the beautiful and smart brown eyes in the past did not have the slightest expression. Only when he saw Li Jexuan, he barely got a little more light. Distressed. Li Jexuan's first reaction was distressed. Tsunade lost her parents at such a young age, but after that, she will lose even more. Chinshojian, until all of her relatives in this world leave, even her boyfriend will die in her arms. If you want to select the top 10 sad figures of Naruto, Tsunade can definitely occupy one of them. Thinking of this, Li Jexuan couldn't help holding Tsunade into his arms. With a warm chest printed on his cheeks, Tsunade couldn't help crying, Kuzan-kun. It's okay, you still have me, I've always been here. Li Jexuan gently stroked Tsunade's soft blonde hair, and comforted, cry out, just cry out. Tsunade couldn't help it anymore, quietly leaning against Li Jexuan's arms, 2 lines of clear tears slowly shed. The beauty shed tears, the hero frowned. This quiet and beautiful scene, even the teacher could not bear to interrupt. However, at this moment, an exaggerated laughter suddenly kicked the door open and broke in. Ha ha ha, Master Jiraiya is on the stage. Jiraiya, with a white explosive head, laughed and rushed into the class. He scratched his head nervously after noticing that the atmosphere was not right. Why don't you guys speak? Are you too happy? This guy, everyone can't help but feel a sense of speechlessness. Is this guy really stupid or fake? Li Jexuan couldn't help but shook his head slightly. Jiraiya, you are destined to be a cup. No wonder he loved Tsunade for a lifetime, and didn't dare to say half of his love word. To make matters worse, Jiraiya, who broke in, also saw Tsunade conspicuously at a glance. Pear blossoms rain, and the pitiful place is even more pitiful. For some reason, as if destined, Jiraiya's heart beat fiercely. Hello, my name is Jiraiya. Jiraiya laughed and stretched out his hand to Tsunade. My hobby is writing novels and admiring beautiful girls. I don't know if these guys with explosive heads are a little nervous, but even in this case, Jiraiya still introduced himself to Tsunade in Li Jexuan's arms. Who cares about you to die? Tsunade was completely irritated, raised his fist, and hit Jiraiya's toad face severely. As a result, under Tsunade's strange power, Jiraiya-sama, who had just gone to school on the first day, fainted like this. However, no one felt sorry for him. Such a fool needs a good fight. Li Jexuan shook his head helplessly. It seems that in this life, Joraji will also pass through Tsunade's iron fist. What a sad man. However, after such a disturbance, Tsunade's mood seemed to calm down a lot. At least after the exercise, there was a little more blood on the face. Seeing this, the elephant mask in the dark corner nodded slightly, turned and flew away. 5 minutes later, in the mansion of the Sensho clan. Thousands of hands pinched his chin and sighed softly. If this is the case, let them go. As long as Tsunade can be happy, even the old-fashioned Senjuma is willing to make certain concessions. In the door, are you sure? But at this moment, sitting in the shadows among the Senju pillars suddenly said coldly, maybe they all thought I was dead, I think it might be me now. It's just that Senshozuma's words haven't been finished. Chinshojian interrupted with a flustered smile. Brother, although my strength is not as good as yours. But in terms of escape, the Flying Thunder God technique was created by me. Hearing this, Chinshuju was silent for a while, and nodded gently, I see. Brother, rest assured, I will make them pay for it. Thousands of hands gritted his teeth, stood up fiercely, and Danzo and Sarutobi followed closely behind them. For the dead nephew and niece, but also for Tsunade, even more elder brother. When the number 1 in the ninja world returns to the battlefield with great speed, it is destined to roll up a huge storm. When Konoha was completely angered, a large number of dark parts left silently. At the same time, the back door of the baby care center also occupies a few hidden parts. This guy is more than dead. Looking at Saruta's corpse, Anbu, who was wearing a hippo mask, curled his mouth in disdain, and took a bite of phlegm. However, suddenly a hand stretched out and steadily caught the mucus. Anbu, wearing a civet cat mask, wiped off the sticky phlegm from his hands, and said coldly, don't spoil the scene. As for what kind of person he is, it doesn't matter. Our task is to find the murderer. As he said, Tanuki Anbu knelt down, carefully examined Saruta's body, and muttered suspiciously, the murderer first used this guy's greed to trick him out. We all said that someone stuffed a letter through the door. It was the letter that asked us to do this. If we did this, we could get 50,000 taels. Tanuki Onbi believed that the couple who lived upstairs were telling the truth. They don't know all this, but they act as accomplices because of greed. After cheating out of Tsuruda, use this organ box to shoot kunai and kill Tsuruda. In order to achieve the purpose of not appearing to kill. Tanuki Anbu walked to the suitcase, frowning involuntarily, but there is no mechanism in this suitcase. And the kunai that shot out has disappeared. Tanuki Anbu pinched his forehead, secretly worried. The hippo Anbu on the side curled his lips disdainfully. That's an ordinary box, can it be possible to hide a person in it? They have checked and deduced many times. But Tanuki Anbu, who heard this, was suddenly startled. Is it? But he quickly shook his head again. This suitcase is too small, let alone an adult, even a child can't fit it in. If it's a baby, maybe. However, that Kuwu has a hole through Tsuruda's throat, and ordinary adults don't want to do it, let alone a baby. So, there are only agencies. However, rummaged through this suitcase, but failed to find any mechanism. Kuwu, who disappeared inexplicably, has no clue. Call. This time it will definitely succeed. In the quiet park, Li Jexuan stared closely at the big tree in front of him, his palms drooping slightly, and the blue flames of chakra condensed in his palms. Zitsa. The light blue arc began to beat between Li Jexuan's palms, combined, and slowly condensed into a blade. Chidori. Li Jexuan roared out his palm. The light blue electric light is like a war horse receiving instructions. He wrapped Li Jexuan himself, turned into a light, and pierced the tree in front of him straight. When Li Jexuan recovered, he had already crossed a distance of nearly 100 meters in an instant. Zitsa. Li Jexuan slowly pulled out his palm from the scorched tree hole, the light blue arc still beating on the tree hole's wound. Suddenly, the whole tree was trembling and turned into a piece of coke, and collapsed. Li Jexuan's Chidori is a bit stronger than Sasuke's, because Li Jexuan did not reduce the quality of Rei Chi, but only reduced the amount of Rei Chi. Turn the standard Rachel's blade into a smaller Rachel's blade. To be precise, this should be called Little Rach, not Chidori. Ha, it succeeded. Li Jexuan let out a long breath and crashed to the ground. Although Xiao Leiki is strong, the chakra that can be consumed is also an amazing number. At the level of Li Jexuan's ninja level, chakra can only barely be released once. After releasing it once, Li Jexuan will lose any ability to move because of exhausting his energy. This means that if this trick is not a last resort, it must not be used. However, he finally developed his technique. In this world, it can be regarded as a whole card for self-protection. Li Jexuan slowly closed his eyes peacefully. Jia Zanjun, what's wrong with you, Jia Zanjun? Don't scare me. In the blur, Li Jexuan seemed to hear an anxious voice calling him. Slowly opened his eyes and found that Tsunade was hugging him, crying in a low voice, I beg you, don't die. Silly girl, what are you crying for? I thought you were going to die. As he said, Tsunade cried out, I'm really scared, so scared to lose you again. Li Jexuan slowly stretched out his hand and wiped the tears from the corners of Tsunade's eyes. I'm fine, but I'm too tired. Tsunade stunned for a moment, and rushed into Li Jexuan's arms fiercely. He broke into a smile and said, you must not laugh at me, and... After thinking for a while, Tsunade suddenly raised his head and looked at Li Jexuan seriously, you can never leave me. Hearing this, Li Jexuan's heart couldn't help but feel warm. He found that Tsunade looked less and less like Tsunade. For him, Tsunade is no longer a rigid cartoon character in anime, but a living person, hugging him, the warmth of real existence. At this moment, Li Jexuan truly understood. Tsunade has become an indispensable existence in his life. It turns out that Tsunade loves me. And I love her too. Li Jexuan smiled and hugged Tsunade tightly into his arms. Trust me, I will never leave you again in my life. Okay. Tsunade curled up in Li Jexuan's arms happily, holding Tsunade's voluptuous waist. Li Jexuan secretly swore, besides, no one can take you away from me. Whether it's broken, or it's coming. He lay quietly in the woods with Tsunade in his arms, the fragrance of the plants makes people intoxicated. Tsunade had fallen asleep in Li Jexuan's arms. In the silent woods, lovely boys and girls are hugging each other quietly. On an exceptionally dense tree, the elephant mosk's nose involuntarily protruded leaves. But after thinking about it, he drew back. Forget it, Master Shuma also said, Sui Tsunade-sama, please be happy. Even Anbu, who has always been known for his coldness, was unwilling to break it personally in the face of such a warm scene. Character: Lee Jexuan. Chakra level: the basics of ninja. Cutting tool: time and space are nothing. Items: 30 bottles of energy potions. Master ninjutsu: Shaolei Chi A+. In less than 2 weeks after being in the Hokage world, Lee Jexuan already had such a family background, and Lee Jexuan himself was satisfied. However, reality tells Lee Jexuan that this is far from enough. The Ninja World War has completely broken out. Because of the death of Tsunade's parents, Konoha, the most powerful in Gonin village, broke out completely. Fight the entire ninja world with the power of one village. Konoha Onbi, composed entirely of elite ninjas, raged on the battlefield, taking away one after another alive. Thousands of hands also shuttled through the battlefield with Thunder God, killing the enemy in a flash. But this seems to be far from enough. When the shadows of the other 4 villages came to an end, Konoha suffered a heavy loss without the absolute power of Senjuzuma's final word. As a result, even Konoha's village began to gradually develop pressure. Only the Ninja Academy still maintains such a carefree peace. Today, I will teach you one of the 3 most basic ninjutsu transformation techniques. While speaking, Yamada Jiyuki's hands were not printed. Transfiguration. With a poof smoke, Yamada's second turned into 1,000 hands. Although the amount of chakra has not changed, it is enough to bluff people by just looking at it. 3 seconds later, Yamada Shiji released the transformation technique and nodded with a smile. Everyone can try it. The first time is usually very difficult to succeed. Transformation technique. Lee Jexuan's hand knot was not printed, and chakra went all over. After the smog, Lee Jexuan turned into Yamada's second place, lazily pushing Konoha's forehead on his forehead. Yeah, Yamada, isn't that difficult? Lee Jexuan has 6 sages' intelligence, 6 times that of ordinary people. It can be said to be a genius in the true sense, even if compared to Orochimaru, Kakashi and the others are not inferior at all. The simple ninjutsu of Avatar can only be learned by watching it once. Of course, Lee Jexuan is not the only person in the class that has such talent. Tsunade, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, including the one who was knocked down by Lee Jexuan's fist, had only tried 1 or 2 attempts and had succeeded. After learning the Avatar technique, Lee Jexuan was not idle either, chasing to the office and let Yamada Seiji demonstrate the Avatar technique and the Avatar technique in turn. The closer the war, the greater the pressure Lee Jexuan felt. In just 1 day of study, Lee Jexuan has already mastered the basic 3 Shenzhen technique of ninja. Jia Zanjun, you can actually graduate from ninja school now. Yamada Ji looked at Lee Jexuan with a weird face. He had never seen a young man with such talent as Lee Jexuan. At only 2 years old, he already has chakra reserves of the lower level. In addition, the 3-body technique can be learned by just reading it. In addition, he is very proficient in even kuwu throwing. Yamada Shiyuki once saw with his own eyes that Lee Jexuan only used a kunai to pierce through the wings of a mosquito hundreds of meters away. Even if this guy started practicing in the womb, he was only 3 years old. If the 2-year-old Sharen is announced, it will definitely attract the attention of the entire ninja world. But Lee Jexuan was not prepared to do this, because the title of genius is too heavy. In the near future, Konoha will have a real genius. He graduated from Ninja Academy at the age of 5, was promoted to Zongnin at the age of 6, and was already Shangnin at the age of 12. During this period, he even independently created an S-level ninjutsu capable of cutting through thunder and lightning Rachel. He is Hagi Kakashi, a genius that has never appeared in Konoha's history. But even so, Hagi Kakashi has never won several battles in his life. Either be defeated, or tied, people give the nickname, the flag wood is 55. Even to save the world in the end, he just followed his apprentice to make soy sauce. Except for the eyes with soil, the presence is almost 0. Forget it, I'm not ready to graduate. Lee Jexuan gently shook his head. With my current strength, rushing to the battlefield is just going to die. It seems that you also know. Yamada Jiyuki nodded and said, Konoha has already begun sending shamanen to the battlefield. The severity of this war is beyond words. Okay. Lee Jexuan nodded gently. Yesterday, the guy at Metroway said. Summaries on, probably during this period of time, we will go to the battlefield in batches during this year. I will send you and Xiaodai to the baby care center where you found you. The owner of that house, He Tian, the style is very good. Meitwei, this fool. Lee Jexuan shook his head, even though he didn't know where he was thrown out. At least you should know that the boss there, Tsuruta, is dead. Sure enough, no matter what, you can't let this fool like Matwi go to the battlefield. Lee Jexuan turned his head and smiled and hugged Yamada. Second teacher, since I have learned the 3 Shenzhen technique, should you teach me something new? Hearing this, Yamada Jiyuki smiled bitterly and shook his head. He really got on the thief ship. However, the 2-year-old ninja. This may be the most correct investment in his life. I see, in addition to family secrets, I will teach you all the ninjutsu. While speaking, Yamada Shiyuki's face showed a distressed expression. But only 1 year, if you don't buy the scrolls, it's too difficult to learn. Yamada is the next elite ninjutsu, mastering a total of A-level ninjutsu, 3 B-level ninjutsu, and more than 20 C-level ninjutsu. As for the D-class ninjutsu, it is countless. It is a pity that most of these are family secret techniques. There is only 1 B-level ninjutsu and 10 C-level ninjutsu that Yamada can teach Lee Jexuan. Before learning ninjutsu, I want to test your chakra attributes. Yamada Jiyuki smiled and took out a chakra test paper from the drawer, and said proudly, the reason why I have mastered such ninjutsu is because I have 2 chakra attributes, namely, tearing wind and warm water. With that, the chakra test paper in Yamada Jiyuki's hand suddenly had a crack, and then it became wet again. Chakra itself is non-characteristic. The chakra test paper can only check your own affinity for other chakra changes. Yamada Jiyuki smiled and handed a chakra test paper to Lee Jexuan. To some extent, the more attributes you change, the higher your qualifications. Yamada Seiyuki looked forward to several changes in Lee Jexuan. In fact, Lee Jexuan is also very curious about his chakra attributes. Upon receiving the test paper, a small blue arc suddenly flashed, leaving traces of electric shock on it. Thunder and lightning. Immediately afterwards, the test strip suddenly exploded. Yamada Seiji picked up the fragment of the chakra test paper in confusion. This one is water. This one is fire. Yamada Shiyuki's voice grew louder and louder, and it became more and more urgent. Wind, soil, yin, yang. How is this possible? 7 changes. In the following days, Lee Jexuan had a very fulfilling life. In the daytime, I studied the history of ninja world at the Ninja Academy. After school, I opened a small stove to learn ninjutsu at Yamada Seiyuki's place. At night, I went home to practice physique with Medway. Although it was hard work, Lee Jexuan could feel that his strength was rapidly increasing. Well, today's earth flow wall release is not perfect. Lee Jexuan walked into the house while thinking, next time try to increase the chakra by about 1/5. Thinking about it, Lee Jexuan took off his clothes and looked at Medway casually. Uncle Matt, what are we doing today? Push-ups or sit-ups? To Lee Jexuan's surprise, Medway shook his head with a serious face. Not training today. Lee Jexuan knew that once the special training of the Matt family started, rain or shine. What is it today? Summaries on, your talent is very good. Lee Jexuan shrugged indifferently. He didn't need to say this, he knew it too. Even without a system, his soul for 2 lives is much stronger than ordinary people. So, I think it's time to teach you this physical art. While talking, Medway took out a bright golden scroll from his arms. Is this, Bamindunjia? Before taking the scroll, Lee Jexuan couldn't help swallowing wildly. Lee Jexuan didn't do what he thought of, except for the things that Madwi cherished so much. Lee Jexuan trembling hands opened the bright golden scroll, and the conspicuous 8-door Dunjia made Lee Jexuan hold his breath involuntarily. It turned out to be Bamindunjia. Although Lee Jexuan believes that Medway will not hide privately, one day he will teach the 8 schools of Dunjia to him. But when this day really came, Lee Jexuan was still excited and unable to control. Although, Bamindunjia is only an A-level ninjutsu. Not even Kakashi's rage. But the meaning of the two is completely different. Rachel may be very strong, but it is much mediocre when placed in the ranks of Forbidden S-level ninjutsu. For the average ninja, 8-door Dunjia may be a chicken rib that kills 800 enemies and loses 1,000, and is only listed as A-level ninjutsu. But for ninjas like Matkey and Rock Lee who are talented in hard work, 8 doors Dunjia is undoubtedly a forbidden technique in a forbidden technique. Otherwise, there will be no overbearing Yikai kicking Ludaoban. Opening, rest, birth, injury, do, jing, shock, and death. Open the catalog, 8 of them are impressive. Turning it down again, the surface lotus, the inner lotus, the Chow peacock, the day tiger, including the thunderous Yikai all lay quietly after the corresponding door opened. This is a complete set of inheritance. Li Jexuan has reason to believe that this is the most precious inheritance of physical skills in the Hokage world. No matter who gets such a precious thing, he will never give it up for a second. But Medway gave him to Li Jexuan, an abandoned baby who had only met for less than 2 months. Why? Li Jexuan raised his head involuntarily, the corners of his eyes were a little sour. Why do you trust me so much? However, Medway did not answer Li Jexuan. Because he has already turned around and cooked herbs. Perhaps in the eyes of Medway, such inheritance is justified. Fool, although moved, Li Jexuan is not a lesser child after all. Since you want to repay Metroway, you can't do without strength. After adjusting his mentality, Li Jexuan carefully studied the scroll of 8-door Dunjia in his hand. According to the plot in the comics, Xiao Li can already open 5 doors when he takes the Zhongnan exam. Although the price of opening the 5 doors is disability, Li Jexuan believes that with his current physique no less than Zhongran, he can at least open the 4 doors. The main test of Baman Dunjia is the body of the operator, but it is much simpler to use chakra. The first Wei Shengmin, Li Jexuan circulated the chakra in his head according to the cloud picture on the scroll. Every time chakra moved forward, the slight stinging increased a little. This feeling is quite a bit of the rushing pulse in the Chinese legend. When Li Jexuan completed the operation according to the cloud map, the tingling sensation reached its limit. At a certain moment, Li Jexuan only felt his head exploded. Regain consciousness, whether it is speed or strength, there is a comprehensive improvement. This feeling is as enjoyable as the gene lock is opened in the legend. Li Jexuan gently clenched his fist and was able to control his body 100%, which gave him an illusion. He seems to be omnipotent. Li Jexuan also opened the next 3 doors smoothly. He will not get tired anymore by resting, and his strength and speed will be further improved by the life and injury, and even a faint green chakra flame will be inspired. Should you take advantage of the trend to attack Duman? Li Jexuan felt that his strength was at its peak. Or, give it a try. The sooner he gets stronger, the sooner Li Jexuan can help Medway. Thinking of this, Li Jexuan, who has always been cautious, couldn't help but make up his mind. But just when he was about to rush to open the door, a generous palm was pressed on his shoulder. Enough. Hearing this voice, Li Jexuan finally calmed down. Even though Lok Li trained so hard, he became disabled after opening the door at the age of 15. The consequences would be disastrous if he rushed into it like this. Call. As soon as the anger is relaxed, the injury is automatically removed. As soon as the wound was lifted, Li Jexuan was surprised to find that he couldn't lift a bit of strength all over his body. He fell to the ground involuntarily, and a little blood began to seep under his fair skin. Is it so difficult just to hurt the door? Li Jexuan only felt that his whole body was wailing, like the feeling of an old bicycle being stiffly bowed by a 300 jin fat overlord. It's no wonder that Medway didn't announce the training mission today. After all, his body is still too young. Although the strength is strong enough, it still suffers from the blood chi content. It seems that his current limit is only hurting the door. Remember, when practicing Baman Dunjia, don't get lost in that powerful force. Medway threw Li Jexuan into the warm medicated bath and shook his head gently. Youth can burn, but it can't be in this place. If it weren't for you, a fool, could I make it so desperate? Li Jexuan rolled his eyes, closed his mouth and ignored Medway's creed of youth. He wasn't a fool like Li Luok. How could he shout such a declaration of youth in the 2nd grade? Slowly closing his eyes, Li Jexuan grinned slightly. Although I don't want to be a youth idiot, I don't allow you to burn yourself like that. Wait, give me a little more time, I can save you. The Silent Woods. Chen. Wei. Li Jexuan changed his hands, and the 3 seals were completed in 1 second. Dilubi. The palms full of chakras touched the earth, and a huge wall of soil nearly 10 meters thick slammed out of the earth, splitting a small piece of wood. Jia Xuanjin, your earth flow wall is perfect. Even seeing such a perfect B-level ninjutsu, Yamada Jiyuki couldn't see any surprised expression on his face. It's not that Li Jexuan's earth flow wall has a problem, but Yamada's second is completely numb. In less than a month, Li Jexuan had mastered more than a dozen C-level ninjutsu. As for the Class B ninjutsu Doliubi, it only took Li Jexuan 5 days. However, Li Jexuan was still not very satisfied with this kind of earth flow wall. Tuliubi is a very powerful defensive ninjutsu. Among Naruto, the most frequent use of Tuliubi is no one else but Kakashi, who is known as Naruto 55 Kai. The printing time of less than half a second gave Kakashi almost the nickname of Earth Shadow. Ms. Yamada, next one. But the next promotion requires years of water milling. Li Jexuan indicated that Yamada Seiyuki is ready to start the next ninjutsu teaching. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.